They called him the Mad Duke. They said marrying him was a death sentence. Elena Whitmore stood at the altar beside a man whose own family had abandoned him, whose reputation made grown men cross the street. 18 years old, penniless, and out of options. Everyone whispered she'd be dead within a month, locked away, driven insane, or worse. But here's what they didn't know. Lucian Blackridge wasn't mad, and Elena Whitmore wasn't helpless. This is the story of how two outcasts dismantled an empire of lies. Stay until the end. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The gossip started 3 weeks before the wedding. It spread through drawing rooms like fire through dry brush, whispered over tea, murmured behind fans, passed from servant to mistress to street corner. Elena Whitmore is marrying the Mad Duke. The girl had no choice, of course. Her father's debts had finally caught up with the family. The creditors were circling. The house would be seized within the month. And then Lucian Blackridge made his offer. No one could quite believe it. The Duke rarely left his estate. He hadn't been seen in London society for nearly 5 years. Some said he'd murdered a servant in a fit of rage. Others claimed he talked to ghosts, that he screamed at shadows, that his own mother had locked him in the East Wing before fleeing to the continent. The stories varied, but the conclusion was always the same. Lucian Blackridge was dangerous, unstable, and completely insane. Elena's mother wept when the offer came. Her father wouldn't meet her eyes. "It's just for a little while," he'd said, his voice hollow, "just until we can sort out the finances." They both knew he was lying. Elena sat in her room that night, staring at the contract her father had already signed. She was 18 years old. She liked books more than parties, questions more than answers. She had no particular beauty to recommend her. Her face was too angular, her manner too direct. She'd never expected a love match, but she'd also never expected this. A marriage to a madman, a life locked away in some distant manor, waiting for the inevitable. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something closer to rage. The wedding took place on a cold morning in March. The church was nearly empty. Elena's parents sat in the front row, her mother clutching a handkerchief, her father staring straight ahead with the blank expression of a man attending a funeral. A handful of distant relatives filled the remaining pews, their faces carefully neutral. No one from Lucian's family had come. Not his mother, not his uncles, not even the cousins, who stood to inherit if something happened to him. The absence spoke louder than any sermon. Elena stood at the back of the church, her hands cold inside her gloves. Her dress was simple, white, borrowed, too loose in the shoulders. No veil, no flowers. The priest looked uncomfortable, like he'd rather be anywhere else. She took a breath and started down the aisle. Lucian Blackridge was already waiting at the altar. He was taller than she'd expected, lean, with dark hair that fell slightly too long at his collar, and sharp features that might have been handsome if they weren't so carefully blank. He wore black, no decorations, no family crest. His hands were at his sides. He didn't fidget, didn't look around, just stood there, perfectly still, watching her approach. His eyes were gray, cold, assessing. Elena met them without flinching. When she reached the altar, he didn't smile, didn't offer his hand, just turned slightly toward the priest, waiting. The ceremony was mercifully brief. Elena barely heard the words. She repeated her vows mechanically, felt the cold weight of the ring slide onto her finger. When the priest pronounced them married, Lucian turned to her with that same blank expression. He leaned in. She thought he might kiss her. Instead, he said very quietly, "Try not to faint. They're already betting on how long you'll last." His voice was low, controlled, and utterly devoid of emotion. Elena's spine straightened. "I don't faint." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or curiosity. But it was gone before she could identify it. He stepped back, offered his arm. She took it, and together they walked back down the aisle. Behind them, the whispers began immediately. The reception was worse. It took place in the Whitmore house, which was already half-packed in preparation for the creditors. The furniture looked shabby in the daylight. The refreshments were cheap. The guests stood in clusters, their voices low, their eyes following Elena and Lucian wherever they moved. Elena's mother cornered her near the refreshment table. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hands shaking. "You can still come home," she whispered. If you need," she trailed off. They both knew there was no home to come back to. Elena squeezed her mother's hand. I'll be fine. He's dangerous, Elena. Everyone says a lot of things. Elena kept her voice even. Most of them are lies. Her mother looked like she wanted to argue. Instead, she just pulled Elena into a desperate hug, holding on too tight, like she was afraid to let go. When she finally stepped back, Lucian was standing a few feet away, watching. Elena's mother went pale. She mumbled something incomprehensible and fled toward Elena's father. Lucian didn't react. He just held out a glass of wine. You look like you need this. Elena took it. The wine was terrible, cheap and sour. She drank it anyway. Your mother thinks I'm going to murder you, Lucian observed. His tone was conversational, almost detached. She's not the only one. He took a sip of his own wine, grimaced. For what it's worth, I have no intention of murdering you, or locking you in the attic, or any of the other creative scenarios people have invented. That's reassuring. I doubt you believe me. Elena studied him. He was still standing perfectly still, his shoulders straight, his expression neutral. But there was something in the way he held himself, a tension, like he was braced for a blow that never quite came. I don't know what to believe, she said finally, but I'm not stupid enough to trust rumors. That flicker again, surprise or curiosity, she still couldn't tell which. Good, he said. That will make this easier. Before she could ask what he meant, one of her distant uncles approached, his face flushed with wine and false sympathy. My dear Duke, the uncle began, his voice too loud. What a unique match. I'm sure you and young Elena will be very happy together. The words were honeyed poison. Lucian's expression didn't change. I'm sure we will. The uncle leaned in, dropping his voice to a stage whisper. Of course, if you ever find yourself in need of assistance with management of the estate or any financial matters, I have considerable experience. I'm quite capable of managing my own affairs. Lucian's voice was soft, but it cut through the uncle's rambling like a blade. Thank you for your concern. The uncle's smile faltered. He glanced at Elena, back to Lucian, then retreated with a muttered excuse. Elena felt something loosen in her chest. Not quite relief, but close. He'll tell everyone you threatened him, she said quietly. I know. You don't care. Should I? Lucian set down his wine glass. He was trying to position himself as my financial advisor so he could embezzle from the estate. I've dealt with 3 others like him in the past year. They're vultures. Elena blinked. She'd thought her uncle was just being performatively sympathetic. She hadn't realized he was actually making a play for control. You knew what he wanted before he even spoke. It's not difficult to predict. Everyone wants something. Lucian glanced around the room, his expression carefully neutral. Your father wanted his debts cleared. Your mother wanted you safe. Your relatives want access to my money. And you? He turned back to her, those gray eyes sharp and assessing. I haven't figured out what you want yet. Elena's throat tightened. The honest answer was survival. A roof over her head. Protection from her father's creditors. A life that wasn't dictated by poverty and desperation. But something about the way he asked made her hesitate. I want, she said slowly, to not be treated like an idiot. Lucian's eyebrows rose slightly. Is that common? Constantly. For the first time since they'd met, something that might have been amusement crossed his face. It was gone in an instant, but Elena caught it. Then we're in agreement, he said. I despise being patronized. Before Elena could respond, the carriage arrived. The journey to Black Ridge Manor took 6 hours. They rode in silence for the first 3. Lucian sat across from her, his posture rigid, his eyes fixed on some middle distance. Elena watched the countryside roll past, fields giving way to forest, villages growing sparser and more isolated. Finally, she said, You're not what I expected. Lucian's gaze shifted to her. What did you expect? Someone less coherent. His mouth tightened. Ah, yes. The rumors. He was quiet for a moment. They started when I was 16. I had a seizure during a hunting party, fell off my horse, convulsed for several minutes. When I woke up, I didn't remember where I was. Couldn't recognize my own mother for nearly an hour. Elena felt her stomach drop. That's not madness. That's a medical condition. Try explaining that to high society. Lucian's voice was bitter. Within a week, the story had morphed. I'd gone rabid. I'd attacked someone. I'd started speaking in tongues. By the end of the month, my own mother was avoiding me. She was terrified I'd do something violent, something that would destroy what was left of the family reputation. So she left. Lucian's jaw tightened. She told everyone I was being cared for by specialists. The truth is, she couldn't stand to be near me. None of them could. Every conversation became a minefield. Every social event, a risk. Eventually, I stopped trying. It was easier to just disappear. Elena processed this slowly. How often do you have seizures? Not often. Maybe once every few months. Less, if I'm careful. Careful how? Lucian hesitated. For the first time, he looked uncertain. I have triggers. Stress, lack of sleep, certain patterns of light or sound. If I manage those carefully, I can usually prevent them. That's why you live isolated. That's why I live isolated. He met her eyes. It's not safe for me to be around people who panic. During a seizure, I'm vulnerable. If someone decides I'm dangerous, if they try to restrain me violently, he trailed off. It's better this way. Elena leaned forward. You're telling me this now because you don't want me to panic when it happens. I'm telling you this now because you deserve to know what you've walked into. Lucian's voice was flat, controlled. You had no choice in this marriage. Your father sold you to clear his debts. The least I can do is be honest about what your life will look like. There it was. The rage Elena had been holding back since her father signed the contract. It flared hot and immediate in her chest. Don't, she said, her voice sharp. Don't act like you're doing me a favor by being honest. You're not my savior. You're a stranger who bought me to, what? To have someone around who won't run away screaming? To have a wife for appearances? Lucian's expression hardened. I bought you, he said coldly, because you were the only option that didn't require me to pretend to be someone I'm not. You're practical. You read philosophy and history instead of society gossip. You asked your father's solicitor to explain the marriage contract clause by clause, instead of just signing it. You think. That's rare. Elena stared at him. You investigated me. Of course I investigated you. I wasn't going to marry someone at random. Lucian's voice was matter-of-fact, but there was an edge to it, something defensive. I needed someone who wouldn't break the first time something difficult happened. Someone who could tolerate isolation. Someone intelligent enough to understand that the world isn't as simple as the stories people tell about it. Someone desperate enough to say yes. Lucian flinched. It was subtle, but Elena saw it. Yes, he said quietly. That too. The carriage fell silent again. Elena turned back to the window. The forest was thick now, pressing in on both sides of the road. The trees were old, their branches tangled overhead, blocking out most of the light. She should have felt trapped, helpless. Instead, she felt oddly steady. I don't faint, she said finally, and I don't panic. If you have a seizure, tell me what to do. I'll do it. Lucian looked at her for a long moment. You mean that? Yes. He exhaled slowly. Some of the tension left his shoulders. All right, then we'll manage. Blackridge Manor appeared as the sun began to set. It was larger than Elena had expected, 3 stories of dark stone, with tall windows and a roof that seemed to press down like a weight. The grounds were immaculate, but cold. No gardens, no decorations, just carefully maintained lawns and gravel paths. The front door opened before the carriage even stopped. A woman in her 50s emerged, gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, sharp eyes, no-nonsense expression. She wore a dark dress with a white apron, the uniform of a head housekeeper. Mrs. Dawson, Lucian said as he stepped down from the carriage. This is Elena, my wife. Mrs. Dawson's eyes swept over Elena, assessing, calculating, making judgments Elena couldn't quite read. Then she nodded once. Welcome to Blackridge Manor, Your Grace. The title felt strange. Elena wasn't used to being called Your Grace. She nodded back, trying to match Mrs. Dawson's formality. Thank you. Mrs. Dawson turned to Lucian. Everything is prepared. The staff is waiting inside. Good. Lucian glanced at Elena. Mrs. Dawson runs the household. If you need anything, ask her. Mrs. Dawson's mouth tightened slightly, but she didn't argue. She just stepped aside, gesturing for them to enter. The inside of the manor was sterile. That was the only word for it. The floors were polished to a shine. The walls were bare except for a few dark paintings of landscapes. The furniture was functional, expensive, and completely devoid of personality. It felt like a museum, not a home. The staff was lined up in the entrance hall. A butler, 2 maids, a cook, and a young man who Elena guessed was a footman. They all stood perfectly still, their expressions neutral. Lucian didn't introduce them. He just nodded, and they dispersed without a word. Elena felt Mrs. Dawson's gaze on her. The housekeeper was watching her reaction, waiting to see if she'd complain or demand changes or throw a fit. Elena kept her expression carefully blank. "I'll show you to your rooms," Mrs. Dawson said finally. "My rooms." Elena glanced at Lucian. "Separate bedrooms," he said. His voice was flat, almost apologetic. "It's easier that way." Easier for him, Elena thought, because if he had a seizure in the middle of the night, he didn't want her there to see it. She didn't argue. She just followed Mrs. Dawson up the stairs. Yes. Her room was on the 2nd floor, at the end of a long hallway. It was large, cold, and impersonal. A 4-poster bed dominated one wall. A wardrobe stood against another. A small writing desk sat beneath the window. Everything was meticulously clean and utterly lifeless. "Your belongings will arrive tomorrow," Mrs. Dawson said. "Dinner is at 7. His Grace prefers to eat alone, but he's made an exception for tonight." "How generous of him." Mrs. Dawson's eyes narrowed slightly. "His Grace has his reasons for the way he lives. You do well to respect them." Elena met her gaze evenly. "I respect reasons when they're explained to me. I don't respect being treated like a fragile decoration." For a moment, Mrs. Dawson just stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, the corner of her mouth twitched. "You're not what I expected." "So I've been told." Mrs. Dawson nodded once, then turned and left. Elena waited until the door closed, then sank onto the edge of the bed. The enormity of it all crashed over her at once. She was married. She was in a strange house, miles from anyone she knew, bound to a man she'd met 6 hours ago. A man with a condition he couldn't control, living in self-imposed exile because the world had decided he was dangerous. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt curious. Lucian Blackridge wasn't mad. He was careful, controlled, and clearly exhausted by the effort it took to manage his condition while the world insisted on misunderstanding him. He'd chosen isolation not because he wanted it, but because it was safer than the alternative, and he'd chosen her because she'd asked questions instead of believing the rumors. Elena stood and walked to the window. The ground stretched out below her, empty, quiet, bordered by that dense forest. The sun had set completely now. The darkness was total. She thought about what Lucian had said in the carriage. Everyone wants something. What did she want? Not just survival, not just safety. She wanted to understand, to figure out how this strange, isolated, meticulously controlled life actually worked, to see what was real and what was performance. And maybe, just maybe, to prove that she was more than the desperate girl everyone thought they'd married off to a madman. Dinner was tense. It took place in a dining room that could have seated 20 but held only 2. Lucien sat at the head of the table. Elena sat to his right. The distance between them felt vast. The food was good. Roast chicken, potatoes, vegetables cooked with herbs. Elena ate mechanically, aware of Lucian watching her from the corner of his eye. Finally, he said, "You're angry." Elena set down her fork. "I'm adjusting." "That's not the same thing." "No, it's not." She met his eyes. "You want honesty? Fine. I'm angry that my father sold me to clear his debts. I'm angry that I had no say in any of this. I'm angry that everyone assumed I'd be too stupid or too weak to handle the truth about your condition. And I'm angry that you seem to think you're doing me some kind of favor by being straightforward." Lucian's jaw tightened. "I never said I was doing you a favor." "You implied it." "I was trying to—" He stopped, exhaled sharply. "I don't know what I was trying to do. I'm not good at this." "At what? Talking?" "At not being alone." Lucian's voice was raw, unguarded. "I've spent 5 years isolated in this house. The only people I talk to are servants who are paid to tolerate me. I don't know how to have a conversation that isn't transactional. I don't know how to explain myself without sounding defensive, and I definitely don't know how to have a wife." The honesty startled her. Elena leaned back, studying him. He looked exhausted, not physically, but emotionally, like he'd used up all his energy just getting through the day. "Then we're even," she said finally, "because I don't know how to be a wife, especially not to someone I just met." Lucian's shoulders relaxed slightly. "So what do we do?" Elena considered this. "We figure it out, one day at a time. You don't pretend to be normal. I don't pretend to be grateful. We just see what happens." "That's not much of a plan. Do you have a better one?" Lucian almost smiled. "No." They finished dinner in silence, but it felt different now, less hostile, more tentative. When the meal was over, Lucian stood. "I need to check something in the library. You're welcome to join me, if you'd like." It was an olive branch, a small one, but unmistakable. Elena stood as well. "All right, what?" The library was the first room in the manor that actually felt alive. It took up most of the ground floor's east wing, floor-to-ceiling shelves crammed with books, a fireplace that actually had a fire burning in it, comfortable chairs arranged near the warmth. The books weren't organized by any system Elena could identify. They just seemed to spill across the shelves in a chaotic jumble. Philosophy next to botany, history beside poetry. Lucian moved through the room like he belonged there. He pulled a book from a shelf near the back, flipped through it, then set it on a cluttered desk. Elena wandered along the shelves, running her fingers over the spines. "You've read all of these?" "Most of them." Lucian didn't look up from the book. "Some multiple times." "No novels?" "A few. I prefer nonfiction." Elena pulled out a volume at random, a treatise on astronomy from the 1600s. The pages were yellowed, the binding worn. She opened it carefully. "This is incredible. It's outdated. It's history." Elena turned a page, found a hand-drawn diagram of planetary orbits. Someone spent years working on this. Getting it wrong doesn't make it less interesting. Lucian finally looked up. He was watching her with that same assessing expression from the church, like he was trying to figure out a puzzle. "You're different," he said. "You keep saying that." "Because it keeps being true." He closed the book he'd been reading. "Most people look at old texts and see irrelevance. You look at them and see effort, process, the attempt to understand." Elena set the astronomy book back on the shelf. "My father's library was sold off 2 years ago to pay debts. I used to spend hours in there reading anything I could find. When it was gone, She trailed off. "I missed it more than I missed some of the people in my life." Books are more reliable than people. Usually. Lucian crossed to the fireplace, standing with his back to the warmth. The light played across his features, softening them slightly. He looked younger like this, less guarded. "I had a tutor when I was younger," he said, "before the seizures started. He was the one who taught me to value questions over answers. He used to say that certainty was the enemy of understanding." "What happened to him?" "My mother dismissed him after the first seizure. She thought he was encouraging me to be too independent, too argumentative." Lucian's expression darkened. "She wanted me to be manageable, easy. When that became impossible, she left." Elena moved closer to the fire. "My mother wanted me to be marriageable, pretty, quiet, agreeable. I was none of those things. After a while, she just stopped trying. I think she was relieved when your offer came, not because she thought I'd be happy, but because at least I'd be someone else's problem." They stood in silence for a moment, both staring into the flames. "We're a pair, aren't we?" Lucian said finally. "Two people no one wanted, stuck together by circumstance. Circumstance and debt." "That too." Elena turned to look at him. In the firelight, with his guard partially down, he didn't look like the Mad Duke. He looked like someone who'd spent too long pretending not to be lonely. "This doesn't have to be miserable," she said quietly. Lucian met her eyes. "Doesn't it?" "No?" Elena's voice was firm. "We're already here. We're already married. We can make this bearable, or we can make it worse. I'd prefer bearable." "Bearable," Lucian repeated. He almost smiled. "That's a low bar." "It's a realistic bar." He studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded, once. "All right, bearable." It wasn't a declaration of partnership. It wasn't even a promise. But it was a start. The first week passed in careful negotiation. Elena learned the rhythms of the house, early mornings, quiet routines, staff who moved like ghosts through the hallways. Mrs. Dawson ran everything with military precision. The maids cleaned rooms Elena had never even entered. The cook prepared meals no one commented on. Lucian kept to himself most of the time. He spent hours in the library, working on correspondence Elena wasn't invited to see. He ate breakfast alone, took long walks through the grounds without company, and retired to his rooms early. But every evening after dinner, he'd appear in the library. He never explicitly invited her. He'd just be there, reading or writing, and after a few nights, Elena realized it was an open door. She started bringing her own books, sitting in the chair across from his, reading in silence while the fire crackled. They didn't talk much at first, just the occasional comment about a passage, a shared observation about something they'd read. Small things, careful things, testing the boundaries of what this strange arrangement could be. On the 8th night, Lucian broke the pattern. "I need to tell you something," he said. Elena looked up from her book. He was sitting forward in his chair, his hands clasped together, his expression tense. "I had a letter today," he continued, "from my uncle. He's concerned about my well-being. He wants to visit." Elena's stomach tightened. Concerned? That's the word he used. But what he means is he wants to see if I'm still competent, if I'm managing the estate properly, if... Lucian's jaw tightened. If I'm a liability. He wants control of the estate. He wants control, or he wants to prove I'm unfit so someone else can take control. Either way, it's a threat. Lucian stood, pacing toward the window. He'll bring doctors, witnesses. He'll document everything. If I have a seizure while he's here... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Elena set down her book. "When is he coming?" 2 weeks. "Then we have 2 weeks to prepare." Lucian turned to look at her. Prepare how? Elena's mind was already working through possibilities. "You said you have triggers, stress, lack of sleep, certain patterns of light or sound. We eliminate as many of those as possible. We control the environment. We control the schedule. We make sure you're as stable as possible before he arrives." "That's not..." "And," Elena continued, "we present a united front. He's expecting a madman living in isolation. Instead, he finds a functional household, a marriage that works, an estate that's thriving. We don't give him anything he can use against you." Lucian stared at her. "You do that?" "Why wouldn't I?" "Because it's not your fight. Because you barely know me. Because what?" Elena stood, crossing to where he stood by the window. "Because I should just sit quietly while someone tries to tear apart the life you've built? That's not who I am." Lucian's expression was unreadable. "You realize that if this goes wrong, you'll be caught in the crossfire." "I'm already in the crossfire. I've been in it since the moment I walked down that aisle." Elena held his gaze. "You were honest with me from the beginning. You didn't lie about what this would be. The least I can do is be honest back. I'm not going to stand by and watch someone destroy you because they think you're weak." For a long moment, Lucian didn't move. Then slowly, something in his expression shifted. The careful guardedness dropped away, replaced by something raw and startled. "I didn't think..." He stopped, started again. "I didn't think you'd care." "Neither did I," Elena admitted. "But apparently I do. So we're going to deal with this. Together." Lucian nodded slowly. Then, for the first time since they'd met, he smiled. It was small, fragile, but genuine. "Together," he repeated. Tugged. The next 2 weeks were a blur of planning. Elena threw herself into the work with a focus that surprised even her. She met with Mrs. Dawson daily, going over every detail of the household's operation. She reviewed the estate's financial records with Lucian, memorizing names and numbers and contracts. She learned the layout of the manor, the staff's routines, the patterns that governed everything. And she learned about Lucian's condition. He explained it methodically, clinically, like he was describing a mechanical process rather than something that happened to his own body. The seizures were unpredictable, but not random. They followed patterns. Certain things made them more likely: exhaustion, stress, flickering lights, specific sounds. "It's like a threshold," he said one evening. They were in the library, as always, surrounded by books and papers. If I stay below it, I'm fine. But if too many triggers accumulate, you go over the edge. Yes. Elena made notes. So we keep you below the threshold. We manage the stress. We control the environment. We make sure you're sleeping enough, eating regularly, not pushing yourself too hard. It's not that simple. Nothing is simple, but we can try. Lucian watched her writing, his expression thoughtful. You're treating this like a problem to solve. It is a problem to solve. Most people treat it like a curse, something to be feared or pitied or hidden. Elena set down her pen. I'm not most people. No, Lucian agreed quietly. You're not. The days blurred together. They established new routines, regular meals, consistent sleep schedules, quiet evenings in the library. Lucian started showing her his correspondence, explaining the various pressures from family members and business partners. Elena started offering suggestions, pointing out patterns he'd missed. They were becoming partners. Not in the romantic sense. They still barely touched, still kept to their separate rooms, but in the practical, strategic sense. Two people working toward the same goal. And slowly, carefully, Elena realized something. She didn't hate this. The isolation, the strange rhythms of the house, the intellectual challenge of managing Lucian's condition, and the estate, it suited her better than London society ever had. She was good at this, better than she'd expected, and Lucian was noticing. You've reorganized my entire filing system, he said one afternoon, staring at the newly labeled documents on his desk. It was chaos. It was my chaos. Now it's organized chaos. Elena handed him a ledger. And you can actually find things when you need them. Lucian flipped through the ledger, his expression shifting from irritation to reluctant approval. This is actually helpful. I know. He looked up at her, and Elena saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Respect. Not the careful, guarded acknowledgement of the first week, but genuine respect. Thank you, he said. Elena felt her chest tighten. You're welcome. The uncle arrived on a Wednesday. Lord Edmund Blackridge was in his 50s with thinning hair, a permanent sneer, and eyes that calculated value in everything they saw. He brought two companions, a doctor and a solicitor, both wearing expressions of professional concern. Elena and Lucian met them in the entrance hall. Edmund, Lucian said. His voice was flat, controlled. What a surprise. Hardly a surprise, nephew. I sent a letter. Edmund's gaze swept over Elena, dismissive and assessing at once. And this must be the new Duchess. How quaint. Elena smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Lord Edmund, how kind of you to visit. Yes, well, family concerns must be addressed. Edmund gestured to his companions. This is Dr. Pembroke and Mr. Harris, my solicitor. We're here to ensure that everything is in order. Everything is in order, Lucian said. Of course, of course. But you understand, with your condition, certain precautions must be taken for your own protection. The threat was barely veiled. Elena felt anger flash hot in her chest, but she kept her expression neutral. Perhaps we could discuss this over tea, she suggested. I'm sure you're tired from your journey. Edmund's eyes narrowed slightly like he was recalculating. He'd clearly expected either a madman or a terrified wife. Elena was neither. Tea would be lovely, he said finally. The next 3 hours were a careful dance. Edmund and his companions prowled through the manor like predators, looking for weakness. They asked questions about Lucian's health, the estate's finances, the household's management. They took notes. They watched everything. Elena met each question with calm precision. She knew the numbers. She knew the staff. She knew exactly how the estate operated because she'd spent 2 weeks learning it. And Lucian was perfect. Controlled, articulate, showing no signs of the instability Edmund was clearly hoping to find. By dinner, Edmund was visibly frustrated. You seem remarkably stable, nephew, he said as the first course was served. I had heard rumors. Rumors are often inaccurate, Lucian said mildly. As I'm sure you know. Indeed. Edmund's smile was cold. Still, given your history, one wonders if this calm might be temporary. One might wonder many things, Elena interjected smoothly. But wondering is very different from knowing, isn't it? Edmund turned his attention to her. You're quite outspoken for a duchess. Is there a requirement that I be silent? Dr. Pembroke cleared his throat. Lady Elena, if I may, how has the Duke's health been since your marriage? It was a trap. If she said he'd been perfectly well, they'd accuse her of lying. If she acknowledged any issues, they'd use it as ammunition. The Duke manages his health carefully, Elena said, as anyone with a medical condition must. Dr. Pembroke, I'm sure you understand the difference between managing a condition and being incapacitated by it. Pembroke's eyes sharpened. Of course. And has there been any incident since your arrival? Define incident. A seizure, an episode, anything that might indicate what? Elena's voice was cold now. That a neurological condition exists? We're not denying that, Doctor. What we are denying is the implication that it renders the Duke incompetent. He manages his condition. He manages his estate. He manages his affairs. What exactly are you suggesting? The table fell silent. Edmund leaned back in his chair, studying her with renewed interest. My dear Duchess, no one is suggesting incompetence. We're simply concerned. Your concern is noted, Lucian said. His voice was sharp now, the control slipping just slightly. And unnecessary. As you can see, everything here is functioning perfectly well. For now, Edmund said softly. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Us. That night, after Edmund and his companions had retired to their guest rooms, Elena found Lucien in the library. He was standing by the window, his shoulders tense, his hands clenched at his sides. That, he said, without turning around, was worse than I expected. Elena closed the door behind her. He's fishing. He doesn't have anything concrete. He doesn't need anything concrete. He just needs doubt, speculation, a hint of instability. Lucian's voice was tight. One seizure. That's all it would take. One episode in front of his doctor, and everything falls apart. Then we make sure that doesn't happen. Lucian finally turned to face her. He looked exhausted, the careful control from dinner cracking at the edges. You don't understand. I can feel it. The pressure building, the stress, all the triggers I've been managing for weeks. It's all accumulating. And if I... He stopped, jaw tight, refusing to finish the thought. Elena crossed the room to stand in front of him. Listen to me. You are not going to fall apart. You are not going to give him what he wants. We've prepared for this. We know what your triggers are. We've controlled the environment. You just need to hold on for 2 more days. 2 more days, Lucian repeated. He sounded hollow. Yes, 2 more days. And then he leaves, and we go back to normal. Lucian looked at her, and Elena saw something break in his expression, fear maybe, or desperation. What if I can't? You can. How do you know? Because, Elena said firmly, I've watched you manage this for weeks. I've seen how careful you are, how controlled. You're stronger than he thinks, stronger than anyone thinks. Lucian's hands were shaking. Elena reached out and caught them in hers, holding tight. You're not alone in this, she said quietly. Not anymore. For a moment, Lucian just stared at their joined hands. Then he nodded, once, and squeezed back. 2 more days, he said. 2 more days. They stood like that for a long moment, 2 people holding on, trying to steady each other against the storm. And somewhere in that quiet library, with the fire crackling and the night pressing in against the windows, Elena realized something. This had stopped being about survival. She cared. About Lucien, about the estate, about proving that Edmund and everyone like him were wrong. This was her fight now, and she was going to win. The storm broke on the second morning. Elena woke to raised voices echoing through the manor. She dressed quickly and hurried downstairs to find Edmund standing in the entrance hall, his face flushed with anger, while Lucien stood perfectly still, his expression dangerously blank. Absolutely unacceptable, Edmund was shouting. The oversight alone is grounds for legal action. What happened? Elena demanded. Edmund whirled on her. What happened is that your husband has been systematically mismanaging the estate's finances. I've reviewed the books with Mr. Harris. The numbers don't add up. Investments made without proper authorization. Funds moved without documentation. This is either incompetence or something far worse. Elena's mind raced. She'd reviewed those same books with Lucian. Everything had been in order, unless— "You reviewed which books?" she asked sharply. Edmund blinked. "The estate ledgers, naturally, the ones kept in the study." "Those are the old ledgers," Elena said, "from before I arrived. The current records are in the library. Perhaps if you'd bothered to ask where the updated documentation was kept, you wouldn't be making false accusations." Edmund's expression flickered, surprise, then calculation. "Updated documentation. Yes. Would you like to see it?" For a moment, Elena thought he might refuse. Then he smiled, thin and cold. "By all means." The confrontation in the library lasted 2 hours. Elena spread the ledgers, contracts, and correspondence across the desk. Every transaction documented, every investment explained, every decision backed by clear reasoning. She walked Edmund and his solicitor through each entry, her voice calm and precise, dismantling every accusation one by one. Lucian stood by the window, silent, watching. When Elena finished, Mr. Harris looked deeply uncomfortable. He glanced at Edmund, then at the documents, then back again. "Everything appears to be in order," he said quietly. Edmund's jaw tightened. "Appearances can be deceiving." "Can they?" Elena's voice was cold now. "Or is it that you came here expecting to find incompetence and are disappointed that you found the opposite?" "I came here," Edmund said slowly, "out of concern for my nephew's well-being." "No. You came here hoping to find evidence that would let you seize control of this estate. You failed, and now you're scrambling for anything else you can use." Elena stepped forward. "Let me be very clear, Lord Edmund. My husband is not incompetent. This estate is not mismanaged, and if you attempt to spread rumors to the contrary, I will ensure that every person in London knows exactly what you tried to do here." Edmund's face went red. "You dare threaten me?" "I dare state facts." Elena held his gaze. "You have no legal grounds. You have no evidence. All you have is prejudice and ambition, and neither of those will stand up in any court." For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then Lucian spoke. "I think," he said quietly, "it's time for you to leave." His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. Edmund looked at him, then at Elena, then at the document spread across the desk. Finally, he nodded stiffly. "Very well, but this isn't over, nephew." "Yes," Lucian said, "it is." Edmund turned and swept out of the library, his companions trailing behind him. Elena waited until she heard the front door slam. Then her knees went weak, and she sank into the nearest chair. "That," she said, "was terrifying." Lucian crossed to her, kneeling down so they were eye level. His hands found hers again, holding tight. "That," he said, "was brilliant." Elena laughed, sharp, breathless, edged with leftover adrenaline. "I have no idea where that came from." "I do." Lucian's voice was soft, wonder bleeding through the control. "You knew every detail, every number, every contract. You prepared for this like you were going to war." "I was going to war. For me." Elena met his eyes. "For us." Something shifted in Lucian's expression. The careful distance he'd maintained since the wedding finally, completely broke. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "You don't have to thank me. We're married. This is what partners do." "Is that what we are?" Lucian's voice was barely above a whisper. "Partners?" Elena thought about the past 2 weeks. The careful negotiations, the late nights in the library, the gradual building of something that looked nothing like the marriage anyone had expected but felt more real than anything else in her life. "Yes," she said. "I think we are." Lucian's hand tightened on hers. And for the first time since they'd met, Elena saw him without any armor at all, just a man who'd been alone too long, finally realizing he wasn't anymore. "Elena," he said, Whatever he was about to say was cut off by a knock at the door. Mrs. Dawson appeared, her expression carefully neutral. "Their carriage is ready, Your Grace. Lord Edmund is leaving." Lucian stood, pulling Elena up with him. Together they walked to the entrance hall. Edmund was already waiting by the door, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. He looked at them standing side by side, Lucian calm and controlled, Elena unbowed, and something in his expression curdled. "You've made an enemy today," he said quietly. "We made an enemy the day you tried to destroy us," Elena replied. "We just made sure you failed." Edmund's smile was poisonous. "This isn't over." "Yes," Lucian said again. "It is." They stood in the doorway and watched the carriage pull away, disappearing down the long drive and into the forest beyond. When it was finally out of sight, Lucian exhaled slowly. "It's over," he said, like he was testing the words. "It's actually over." Elena looked at him. In the morning light, with the tension finally bleeding out of his shoulders, he looked different, lighter, like a weight had been lifted that he'd been carrying for years. "Yes," she said. "It's over." They stood there for a moment longer, side by side, watching the empty road. Then Lucian turned to her, and the expression on his face made Elena's breath catch. "What you did in there," he said. "What you've done these past 2 weeks. I didn't know it was possible. I didn't know anyone could—" He trailed off, searching for words. Elena understood. "Could care? Could fight." Lucian's voice cracked slightly. "For me. With me. Without expecting anything in return." "Who says I don't expect anything in return?" "Do you?" Elena considered this. What did she want? Not gratitude, not obligation, not the hollow performance of a marriage everyone had expected to fail. "I want," she said slowly, "what we have now. This. Whatever this is. I want to keep building it." Lucian stared at her. Then, slowly, carefully, he reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. It was the first time he'd touched her like that, gentle, almost tender, nothing to do with necessity or strategy or survival. "We'll keep building it," he said quietly. "Together." Elena leaned into the touch, just slightly. Together. They stood in the entrance hall as the morning light spilled through the windows, and for the first time since that cold wedding in March, Elena felt something like hope. This strange, unexpected partnership they'd forged in isolation and adversity, it was real. It was theirs, and no one could take it away. The morning after Edmund's departure felt different. The air in the manor seemed lighter somehow, like the walls themselves had exhaled. Elena woke early, dressed quickly, and found herself drawn to the library. It had become her refuge over the past weeks, the only room in the entire estate that felt alive. Lucian was already there. He stood by the window, a letter in his hand, his expression unreadable. He didn't turn when she entered, but his shoulders shifted slightly, acknowledging her presence without breaking his focus. "Another letter from Edmund?" Elena asked. "No." Lucian's voice was flat. "My mother." Elena stopped mid-step. In all their conversations, Lucian had barely mentioned his mother beyond that initial explanation in the carriage. The woman who'd fled rather than face her son's condition, who'd chosen reputation over family. What does she want? Lucian turned, and Elena saw something cold in his expression. "To come visit. She heard about Edmund's failed attempt. She wants to see for herself that I'm stable." The word landed like a stone. "She abandoned you for 5 years," Elena said carefully, "and now she wants to visit because Edmund couldn't prove you're incompetent?" "That's the summary, yes." Lucian set the letter down on the desk. His movements were controlled, but Elena could see the tension in his jaw. "She's arriving in 3 days." "Tell her no." Lucian looked startled. "What?" "Tell her no. You don't owe her anything. She left when you needed her most. She doesn't get to waltz back in now that it's convenient. She's my mother." "So?" Elena's voice was sharper than she intended. "That doesn't give her the right to treat you like a problem that needs solving. She made her choice. Let her live with it." Lucian stared at her. "You're angry." "Of course I'm angry. She hurt you, and now she wants to come here and what? Judge whether you meet her standards? Decide if you're acceptable enough to acknowledge again?" "Elena, no." Elena crossed to the desk, putting herself between Lucian and the letter. "You don't have to see her. You don't have to let her back into your life just because she decided she's ready. You have the power here. Use it." Lucian's expression was complicated, surprise, confusion, and something that might have been gratitude. "I don't know if I can." Why not? Because she's... He stopped, exhaled sharply. Because part of me still wants her approval, still wants her to look at me and see something other than a burden. It's pathetic, but it's true. Elena's anger softened. She understood that feeling, the desperate need for a parent's acceptance, even when that parent had proven they didn't deserve it. It's not pathetic, she said quietly. It's human. But wanting her approval doesn't mean you have to let her hurt you again. Lucian looked down at the letter. She'll come anyway. If I refuse, she'll make it worse. She'll tell everyone I'm unstable, that I can't handle family visits. She'll use it as ammunition. Then we prepare. The same way we prepared for Edmund. Elena picked up the letter, scanned it quickly. She's bringing a companion, probably another doctor or witness. She wants evidence that Edmund was wrong, or evidence that he was right, and you've just gotten better at hiding it. You think she's working with Edmund? I think she's working for herself. And right now, she doesn't know which side benefits her more. Elena set the letter down. So we show her. We show her that you're not just stable, you're thriving. That this estate is running better than it ever has. That you don't need her or Edmund or anyone else questioning your competence. Lucian was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You're really not afraid of her. Should I be? Most people are. She has a way of making you feel small, inadequate, like you're constantly failing some test you didn't know you were taking. Elena thought about her own mother, the disappointed sighs, the comments about Elena's unmarriageability, the relief when she was finally someone else's problem. I know the type, she said. We'll handle her. Lucian's mouth curved slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. We. Yes. We. Elena met his eyes. That's what partners do, remember? Something in Lucian's expression shifted. He reached out, hesitated, then took her hand. His grip was warm, solid, grounding. Thank you, he said quietly. Elena squeezed back. Don't thank me yet. We still have 3 days to prepare. But as she said it, she felt something coil tight in her chest. Edmund had been a threat, but a predictable one. He'd wanted power, money, control, things Elena could anticipate and counter. Lucian's mother was different. She didn't want the estate. She wanted something far more dangerous, validation. Proof that she'd been right to leave, that her son was exactly the burden she'd always feared, and Elena had no idea how to fight that. The 3 days passed too quickly. Elena threw herself into preparation with the same intensity she'd brought to Edmund's visit. She met with Mrs. Dawson, reviewed the household accounts again, made sure every detail of the estate's operation was documented and accessible. She even had the staff practice their responses to potential questions, polite, professional, giving nothing away. Lucian grew quieter as the days passed. He still came to the library every evening, still worked through correspondence and contracts with Elena. But there was a tension in him now that hadn't been there before, something brittle beneath the control. On the second night, Elena found him in the library at 2 a.m. He was sitting in his chair by the fire, staring into the flames. He hadn't lit any lamps. The only illumination came from the hearth, casting shadows across his face. You should be sleeping, Elena said from the doorway. Lucian didn't look up. I can't. Elena crossed the room and sat in the chair across from him. The fire crackled between them. For a while, neither spoke. Finally, Lucian said, I was 12 the first time she looked at me like I was broken. Elena waited. She'd learned that with Lucian, silence was often more effective than questions. I'd had a seizure during a family dinner, he continued. Nothing dramatic, just a brief absent seizure. I lost time for maybe 30 seconds. When I came back, she was staring at me with this expression. He trailed off. Like she was looking at something diseased, something that needed to be hidden away. You were 12. I was defective. Lucian's voice was hollow. That's what she told the doctor later. I heard her through the door. There's something defective in him, something wrong that we can't fix. She wasn't cruel about it. That was almost worse. She was just resigned, like she'd already grieved the son she'd wanted, and now she was stuck with whatever I was instead. Elena's chest tightened with anger. She was wrong. Was she? Lucian finally looked at her. His eyes reflected the firelight, making them almost luminous. I have a condition I can't control. I have episodes I can't predict. I've had to build my entire life around managing something that might never be manageable. How is that not broken? Because you're not your condition. Elena leaned forward. Yes, you have seizures. Yes, you have to be careful. But you're also brilliant, strategic. You've built a life that works for you instead of forcing yourself into a life that doesn't. That's not broken. That's adaptation. My mother won't see it that way. Then your mother is an idiot. Lucian laughed, sharp, startled, almost bitter. You can't say that. I just did. Elena held his gaze. She abandoned you because she was too weak to handle the reality of your condition. That's on her, not you. And if she comes here expecting you to apologize for existing, she can leave the same way she came. She'll use it against me. Let her try. Elena's voice was fierce now. We beat Edmund with documentation and logic. We'll beat her the same way. She wants to see you as defective? We'll show her a man running an estate better than most of his peers. She wants to see instability? We'll show her control. She doesn't get to define you anymore, Lucian. You do. Lucian stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he stood and crossed to where she sat. He knelt down in front of her chair, bringing them eye to eye. How did you get so brave? He asked quietly. Elena thought about that. I'm not brave. I'm angry. There's a difference. Is there? Brave would be not caring what she thinks. I care. I care that she hurt you. I care that she's coming here to do it again, and I'm angry enough to fight back. Lucian's hand came up, cupping her face gently. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, a touch so careful it made Elena's breath catch. I don't deserve you, he said. Stop that. Elena covered his hand with hers. Stop acting like I'm some kind of saint doing you a favor. I'm here because I choose to be. Because this life, this strange, isolated, complicated life, is better than anything I had before. Because you're... She hesitated, searching for the right words. Because you're real. You don't pretend. You don't perform. And I'm so tired of people who do. Lucian's eyes searched hers. Elena. Whatever he was about to say was interrupted by a sound from upstairs, a sharp crash, followed by rapid footsteps. Lucian's expression changed instantly. The softness vanished, replaced by tension. What was that? Elena asked. I don't know. Lucian stood quickly, helping Elena to her feet. Stay here. Absolutely not. They moved together through the darkened manor, following the sound to the second floor. Mrs. Dawson met them in the hallway, her face pale, a candlestick clutched in one hand. Your Grace, she said breathlessly. I'm so sorry. One of the maids, she was checking the guest rooms for tomorrow and knocked over a vase. The noise, she didn't finish, but Elena understood immediately. The crash, the sudden loud noise in the middle of the night, all the stress of the past few days accumulating. Elena looked at Lucian. His face had gone completely blank. His eyes were unfocused. His hands were trembling. Get everyone out of the hallway, Elena said sharply to Mrs. Dawson. Now! Mrs. Dawson's eyes widened, but she moved immediately, ushering the frightened maid away. Elena turned back to Lucian. Hey, look at me! He didn't respond. His breathing was getting faster, shallower. Elena recognized the signs from their conversations. He was right on the edge. She grabbed his hands, holding tight. Lucian, you're in the hallway. You're safe. Nothing is wrong. His eyes focused slightly, finding hers. That's it, Elena said. Stay with me. Deep breath. In through your nose. Lucian breathed in shakily. Out through your mouth. He exhaled. Again. They stood like that for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Elena talking him through each breath, anchoring him, pulling him back from the edge. Finally, the trembling stopped. Lucian's eyes cleared. He sagged slightly, and Elena caught him, supporting his weight. I'm all right, he said hoarsely. I'm all right. I know. Elena kept her voice steady, but her heart was racing. That had been too close. If she hadn't been there, if he'd been alone. Tomorrow, Lucian said. He was still leaning on her, his voice rough. She's coming tomorrow, and I almost... But you didn't. Elena pulled back enough to look at him. You didn't have a seizure. You managed it. That's what matters. Barely. Barely is enough. Elena's hands moved to his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. You're exhausted. You're stressed. You're dealing with more than anyone should have to handle, and you still held on. That's not weakness, that's strength. Lucian's expression crumbled slightly. I'm so tired, Elena. I know. She understood that exhaustion, the bone-deep weariness of always having to be in control, always having to manage, never being allowed to just exist. Come on, you need sleep. She guided him to his room, the first time she'd entered it since arriving at the manor. It was sparse, functional, with thick curtains drawn tight against any light. A bed, a wardrobe, a single chair. Nothing personal. Nothing that revealed anything about the man who lived there. Lucian sat on the edge of the bed, his shoulders hunched. Elena knelt in front of him. Lie down. I can't sleep, not tonight. Then don't sleep. Just rest. I'll stay here. Lucian's eyes widened. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I'm choosing to. Elena stood and pulled the chair closer to the bed. Lie down. I'll wake you if anything happens. For a moment, she thought he might argue. Then slowly Lucian lay back against the pillows. He didn't bother with blankets, just lay there, staring at the ceiling. Elena sat in the chair and watched. Minutes passed. The tension gradually bled out of Lucian's shoulders. His breathing evened out. His eyes closed. Elena stayed awake, keeping watch, her mind racing through everything that needed to happen tomorrow. They'd prepared as well as they could, but preparation only went so far when the opponent knew exactly which vulnerabilities to target. Lucian's mother would see the near miss from tonight written all over his face, the exhaustion, the strain, and she'd use it. Elena's hands clenched into fists. She wouldn't let that happen, whatever it took. The carriage arrived just after noon. Elena and Lucian stood in the entrance hall, side by side. Lucian looked better than he had the night before. He'd slept for a few hours, eaten breakfast, changed into formal attire. But Elena could see the tension in the way he held himself, the careful control that was already starting to fray. The door opened and Lady Catherine Blackridge swept in. She was tall, elegant, with silver-streaked dark hair and sharp features that reminded Elena uncomfortably of Lucian. She wore expensive traveling clothes, carried herself with absolute confidence, and her eyes swept over the entrance hall with the expression of someone cataloging flaws. Her gaze landed on Lucian, and something complicated flickered across her face: recognition, assessment, and something that might have been regret. But it was gone too quickly for Elena to be sure. "Lucian," she said. Her voice was cool, controlled. "You look well." "Mother." Lucian's voice matched hers for temperature. "What a surprise." "Hardly a surprise. I sent a letter." Catherine's eyes shifted to Elena, and Elena felt the full weight of that assessing gaze. "And this must be your wife. How unexpected." The word carried layers of meaning. Unexpected that Lucian had married. Unexpected that anyone had agreed to marry him. Unexpected that Elena existed at all. Elena smiled. It was the same smile she'd used on Edmund, polite, empty, revealing nothing. "Lady Catherine, how kind of you to visit." Catherine's eyebrow arched slightly. "Indeed." She gestured to the woman standing behind her, middle-aged, severe, carrying a medical bag. "This is Dr. Margaret Winters. She specializes in neurological conditions. I thought she might be useful." "Useful for what?" Elena asked. "For ensuring my son's well-being, naturally." Catherine's tone suggested this should be obvious. "Edmund's letter was quite concerning. I wanted to see for myself that Lucian was being properly cared for." "He's being perfectly cared for," Elena said. "By himself, and by the household staff he employs." "Of course." Catherine's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Still, a professional opinion never hurts. Dr. Winters, if you wouldn't mind examining him later." "I would mind, actually," Lucian said. Catherine blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "I don't need to be examined. I have my own doctors. I manage my own health. You don't get to show up after 5 years and start making medical decisions." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Catherine's expression didn't change, but Elena saw her spine straighten. "I am your mother, Lucian. I have every right to be concerned about your welfare. You lost that right when you left." Lucian's voice was flat, but Elena heard the anger beneath it. "You don't get to pretend you care now that it's convenient. I have always cared. You fled to the continent the moment things got difficult. You told everyone I was being cared for by specialists when the truth was I was alone. You wrote twice in 5 years, and both times it was to ask about the estate's finances. Lucian took a step forward. So no, Mother. You don't get to waltz in here and play concerned parent. That ship sailed a long time ago. Catherine's face went rigid. For a moment, Elena thought she might actually leave. Then her eyes shifted to Elena, and something calculating entered her expression. I see, she said softly. Your wife has given you quite a bit of confidence. My wife, Lucian said, has nothing to do with this. Doesn't she? Catherine moved closer, her voice dropping to something almost gentle. Tell me, dear boy, have you told her everything? About the episodes that last hours instead of minutes? About the times you don't remember what you've said or done? About the paranoia that sets in when you're under too much stress? Elena's stomach went cold. She looked at Lucian, but his expression had gone completely blank. I thought not, Catherine continued. You've always been so good at presenting the manageable version. The seizures are just seizures. The condition is just a condition. But we both know there's more, don't we? Things you don't want anyone to see. Stop, Lucian said. His voice was barely above a whisper. I'm trying to help you. No, you're not. Elena stepped between them, cutting off Catherine's approach. You're trying to undermine him. You're trying to make him feel small and broken so you can justify the fact that you abandoned him. Well, it's not working. Catherine's eyes narrowed. Young lady. Duchess, Elena corrected coldly. And before you continue, you should know that I've spent the past month learning everything about Lucian's condition. The triggers, the patterns, the management strategies. I know about the different types of seizures. I know about the memory issues that can occur post-episode. I know about the psychological strain of managing a neurological condition in a society that refuses to understand it. So if you're trying to shock me or scare me with information I don't have, you're wasting your time. Catherine stared at her. You think you understand because you've read some medical texts? I think I understand because I've been here. I've seen what actually happens instead of what you imagine happens. And the difference between those two things is significant. Is it? Catherine's voice sharpened. Tell me, Duchess, has he had an episode since you arrived? Elena hesitated for half a second. It was enough. Catherine smiled. I see. And how did you handle it? Did you panic? Did you realize what you'd actually married into? Did you understand for just a moment what it's like to live with someone who can't control their own mind? My mind is fine, Lucian said through gritted teeth. My brain has a medical condition. That's not the same thing, isn't it? Catherine turned back to him. Lucian, darling, I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm trying to be realistic. This condition will only get worse as you age. The episodes will become more frequent, more severe. You'll lose more time, more control. Eventually, you won't be able to manage the estate at all. You know this. The doctors have told you this. Some doctors, Dr. Winters interjected quietly. Both Catherine and Lucian looked at her, startled, as if they'd forgotten she was there. Not all. The research on epilepsy is evolving. There are new treatments being developed, new management strategies. Catherine's expression tightened. Dr. Winters, with respect, Lady Catherine, I've reviewed the medical history you provided. The Duke's condition appears to be well controlled. Yes, he has seizures. Yes, there are complications, but nothing I've seen suggests inevitable decline. The silence that followed was deafening. Catherine's face had gone pale with anger. You were brought here to provide a professional assessment. And I am, Dr. Winters said calmly. But I'm a doctor, not an advocate for your personal agenda. If you wanted someone to rubber stamp a diagnosis of incompetence, you should have been more explicit in your instructions. Elena had to bite the inside of her cheek to keep from laughing. Catherine looked like she'd been slapped. I see, Catherine said icily. Then perhaps you won't be needed after all. Perhaps not. Dr. Winters picked up her bag. She looked at Lucian. For what it's worth, Your Grace, you seem to be managing admirably. Continue with whatever strategies you've been using. They're clearly working. She nodded to Elena, ignored Catherine completely, and walked out the front door. The silence stretched. Finally, Catherine said, That was unfortunate. For you, maybe, Elena replied. Catherine's eyes flashed. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Actually, I do. I'm dealing with a woman who abandoned her son and is now trying to justify it by proving he's as broken as she always claimed. Well, he's not. He's managing his condition. He's running this estate. He's building a life. And you're not part of it. He's my son. He's an adult you haven't seen in 5 years, an adult who's made it very clear he doesn't want you here. Elena's voice was steel. So I'll ask you once, will you leave quietly, or do we need to make this more difficult? Catherine stared at her for a long moment. Then her gaze shifted to Lucian, standing silent behind Elena. You're going to let her speak for you? Catherine asked. Lucian stepped forward, coming to stand beside Elena. She's not speaking for me. She's speaking with me. There's a difference. Catherine's expression crumpled slightly. For just a moment, Elena saw something real beneath the control. Hurt, maybe, or genuine regret. But then it was gone, replaced by cold dignity. I see, Catherine said quietly. Then I suppose there's nothing more to say. She turned and walked toward the door. But before she reached it, she stopped and looked back at Lucian. For what it's worth, she said, I'm sorry for leaving, for not being strong enough to stay. You deserve better than what I gave you. Lucian's jaw tightened. Yes, I did. Catherine nodded once, then left. Elena and Lucian stood in the entrance hall, listening to the sound of the carriage pulling away. When it was finally silent, Lucian said, That was... He didn't finish. His knees buckled. Elena caught him before he hit the ground, supporting his weight as best she could. Lucian! His eyes were unfocused, his breathing rapid. Elena recognized the signs immediately. The confrontation had pushed him over the edge he'd been balancing on for days. Mrs. Dawson! Elena shouted. The housekeeper appeared instantly, her face pale. Your Grace, help me get him to his room, now. Together, they managed to half-carry Lucian up the stairs. He was conscious but barely present, his body trembling with the effort of staying upright. They got him to his bed just as the seizure hit. It was worse than Elena had imagined. His entire body went rigid, then convulsed violently. His eyes rolled back. Sounds came from his throat that didn't sound human. Elena's training kicked in. She made sure he was on his side, made sure nothing was near him that he could hurt himself on, made sure his airway was clear. Mrs. Dawson hovered nearby, her hands clasped together, her face frightened. How long do these usually last? Elena asked. Minutes. Sometimes longer. Mrs. Dawson's voice shook. Oh, Your Grace, I'm so sorry. The stress of the visits, it was too much. It doesn't matter now. Elena kept her voice steady, but her hands were shaking. We just have to wait it out. The seizure lasted 4 minutes. 4 minutes of watching Lucian's body betray him, of seeing the control he worked so hard to maintain completely shattered. When it finally stopped, he went limp. Elena checked his pulse, fast but steady. His breathing was ragged but evening out. His eyes were closed. Get water, Elena told Mrs. Dawson. And something soft for his head. He'll be disoriented when he wakes up. Mrs. Dawson fled. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, her hand finding Lucian's. His fingers were cold. She rubbed them gently, trying to warm them. You're all right, she murmured. You're safe. I'm here. His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then gradually finding her face. Elena? His voice was hoarse, confused. I'm here. What? He tried to sit up, and Elena gently pushed him back down. You had a seizure about 5 minutes ago. You need to rest. Confusion flickered across his face, then understanding, then shame. He turned his head away, refusing to look at her. Don't, Elena said firmly. Don't you dare be ashamed. She was right, Lucian said. His voice was hollow. My mother, she was right. I can't control this. I can't... Stop. Elena's hand cupped his face, forcing him to look at her. You held on for 3 days under more stress than anyone should have to handle. You confronted your uncle. You confronted your mother. You stood your ground when they both tried to tear you down. And yes, you had a seizure. You have a neurological condition. That's going to happen sometimes. But it doesn't mean you're broken. I couldn't even make it through. You made it through everything that mattered. Edmund left. Your mother left. They both failed to prove what they came here to prove. You won. This? She gestured to the bed. This is just your body recovering from a battle. It's not weakness, it's aftermath. Lucian stared at her. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. How are you not afraid? Elena thought about that. Was she afraid? Yes. Watching him seize had been terrifying. Seeing him so vulnerable, so completely beyond his own control, it had shaken something in her. But fear wasn't the same as rejection. I'm afraid, she admitted. But not of you. I'm afraid for you. I'm afraid of what it costs you to live in a world that won't try to understand. I'm afraid of how exhausted you are from fighting battles you shouldn't have to fight. But I'm not afraid of this. Of who you are. Lucian's hand found hers, gripping tight. I don't know what I did to deserve you. You let me in. You were honest. You didn't try to make this something it's not. Elena squeezed back. That's more than most people would have done. They sat like that for a long moment, Elena on the edge of the bed, Lucian lying exhausted beside her, their hands linked. Finally, Lucian said quietly, What happens now? Elena looked at him. This man who'd been called mad, who'd been abandoned by everyone who should have protected him, who'd built a life in isolation because it was safer than being vulnerable. And she made a decision. Now, she said, we stop defending. We stop reacting to whatever threat comes next. We start building something that can't be torn down. Lucian's eyebrows rose. How? I don't know yet. But we'll figure it out. Elena's voice was fierce. Together. The word together hung in the air between them like a promise neither of them quite knew how to keep. Lucian fell asleep an hour later, exhausted from the seizure and the emotional wreckage of his mother's visit. Elena stayed beside him until his breathing evened out, then slipped quietly from the room. Mrs. Dawson was waiting in the hallway, her face drawn with worry. How is he? The housekeeper asked. Sleeping. He'll be disoriented for a while, but he'll recover. Elena kept her voice low. Has this happened before? When I wasn't here? Mrs. Dawson nodded slowly. 3 times in the past 2 years, each time after difficult circumstances. His uncle's visits, legal correspondence, once after a letter from his mother arrived. Elena's jaw tightened. And no one thought to mention this pattern? His Grace doesn't like to discuss it. He considers it a failure. Mrs. Dawson's voice was careful. He works very hard to appear in control at all times. Too hard, Elena muttered. She looked at the housekeeper. I need to know everything, every trigger, every pattern, every time this has happened. If we're going to protect him, I need the full picture. Mrs. Dawson studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. Come with me. They went downstairs to Mrs. Dawson's small office off the kitchen. The housekeeper pulled out a leather journal from a locked drawer, pages filled with neat handwriting, dates, observations. I've been keeping records, Mrs. Dawson said quietly. His Grace doesn't know. I thought, if something happened, if there were questions, it would be useful to have documentation. Elena took the journal, flipping through pages. Each entry detailed Lucian's condition on a given day, sleep patterns, stress levels, any incidents. The picture that emerged was both better and worse than Elena had imagined. Better because the seizures were less frequent than rumors suggested, maybe once every few months, sometimes less. Worse because every single one corresponded to family interference. Edmund's visits, his mother's letters, distant cousins asking for money. The pattern was undeniable. They're destroying him, Elena said flatly. Slowly, systematically, they're using his condition against him. Yes, Mrs. Dawson's voice was bitter, and he lets them because he still believes he owes them something. Loyalty, duty, family obligation. Elena closed the journal. Not anymore. Your Grace? If they keep coming, if they keep pushing, eventually something will break that we can't fix. Elena met Mrs. Dawson's eyes. We need to cut them off, completely. No more visits, no more letters, nothing. His Grace won't agree to that. He still thinks he can manage them. Then we'll have to convince him otherwise. Elena stood, starting tomorrow. But tomorrow came with its own complications. Elena woke to urgent knocking on her bedroom door. She stumbled out of bed, still half asleep, and opened it to find one of the maids, her face pale. Your Grace, I'm sorry, but there's someone at the door. He says it's urgent. Elena dressed quickly and went downstairs. A young man stood in the entrance hall, mud-splattered and exhausted, holding a sealed letter. "Duchess Blackridge?" he asked. "Yes, from London. The sender said it was critical you receive this immediately." He handed her the letter, then looked around nervously. "Is the Duke available?" The sender also said, "The Duke is unavailable," Elena said firmly. "I'll handle whatever this is." The messenger looked uncertain, but nodded and left. Elena broke the seal on the letter. It was from her father's former solicitor, a man she hadn't heard from since the wedding. "Your Grace, I write to inform you of a matter of some urgency. Lord Edmund Blackridge has filed a petition with the Court of Chancery seeking to have your husband declared legally incompetent and to appoint a guardian to manage his affairs. He claims to have medical testimony and witness statements supporting his case. The hearing is scheduled for 3 weeks from today. I felt you should be aware, though I confess I have no standing to represent the Duke in this matter. Your obedient servant, Mr. Thomas Hartley." Elena read the letter twice, her hand shaking with rage. Edmund hadn't given up. He'd just changed tactics. Instead of trying to prove incompetence through visits and observation, he was taking it to court, forcing a public hearing where Lucian would have to defend himself in front of judges, doctors, and witnesses. It was brilliant and vicious. Mrs. Dawson appeared at Elena's elbow. "Your Grace, what's wrong?" Elena handed her the letter wordlessly. Mrs. Dawson's face went white as she read. "He can't. This isn't legal." "It's completely legal. Edmund is family. He has standing to petition the court if he believes Lucian is a danger to himself or the estate." Elena took the letter back, her mind already racing. "And once the petition is filed, we can't ignore it. If we don't show up, if we don't defend against it, the court will rule in Edmund's favor by default. His Grace can't go to London. Not now, not after yesterday." "I know." Elena stared at the letter. "But if he doesn't, he loses everything." She went to Lucian's room and found him awake, sitting on the edge of his bed. He looked terrible, pale, exhausted, moving carefully like everything hurt. "You should still be resting," Elena said. "I've rested enough." Lucian's voice was hoarse. "I heard someone at the door." Elena hesitated. Then she handed him the letter. She watched his face as he read, saw the moment he understood what Edmund had done. His expression went completely blank, the same terrifying emptiness she'd seen before he seized. "Lucian, he's going to win." Lucian's voice was flat. "I can't go to London. I can't stand in front of a court and defend myself. The stress alone would trigger an episode, and then they'd have exactly the evidence they need. So we don't let you get stressed." Lucian laughed, harsh, bitter. "Elena, they're going to parade doctors in front of judges and detail every seizure I've ever had. They're going to present witnesses who'll swear I'm violent or unstable or incompetent. And I'll have to sit there and listen to it all while trying not to prove them right by having a breakdown in the courtroom. Then we prepare. We get our own doctors, our own witnesses. We document everything. It won't matter." Lucian stood, started pacing. "Edmund has money, connections, time. He can pay for any testimony he needs, and He gestured vaguely at himself. "I have a condition that terrifies people, that makes them think I'm dangerous. No amount of documentation will change that fundamental fear." Elena watched him pace, watched him spiral into the same defeated resignation she'd seen in his mother's visit. And something in her snapped. "Stop," she said sharply. Lucian froze. "Stop assuming you've already lost. Stop acting like Edmund has more power than he does. Stop giving up before the fight even starts." "I'm being realistic. You're being afraid." Elena crossed to him, grabbed his arms, forced him to look at her. "And I understand why. But fear isn't going to win this. Strategy will. Documentation will. The truth will. And we have all three. The truth doesn't matter in court. The truth always matters. It just has to be presented correctly." Elena let go of his arms. "Listen to me. Edmund filed this petition because his previous attempts failed. That means he's desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. We just have to find them and exploit them." Lucian stared at her. "You're talking about going to war. I'm talking about survival. If we lose this, Edmund gets control of the estate. You lose your home, your independence, everything you've built. I'm not letting that happen." "We can't win." "We can." Elena's voice was fierce. "But only if you stop telling yourself you're already beaten. Edmund expects you to roll over. Your mother expected you to break. Everyone expects you to fail because that's what they've always expected. Prove them wrong." Lucian was silent for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "How?" Elena took a breath. "We go on the offensive. We stop defending against attacks and start making Edmund defend himself. We show the court that his petition isn't about concern. It's about greed. We document every attempt he's made to seize control, every visit, every letter, every manipulation. And we present a duke who's not just competent, who's thriving." "I collapsed yesterday. You had a seizure after days of extraordinary stress caused by family members who've spent years trying to undermine you. That's not incompetence. That's a medical event with a clear cause. We document the pattern. We show that your condition is manageable when you're not under siege." Lucian's expression was complicated: fear, hope, and something that might have been the beginning of anger. "You really think we can do this? I think we have to try." Elena met his eyes. "And I think if we do this right, we can end this permanently. Not just win this case, but make sure Edmund can never try this again." "That's ambitious." "That's necessary." Elena's jaw set. "I'm done with half measures. I'm done with playing defense. If Edmund wants a fight, we'll give him one. But on our terms." Lucian studied her for a long moment. Then slowly, something in his expression shifted. The defeat started to fade, replaced by calculation, by the sharp intelligence she'd seen glimpses of over the past weeks. "All right," he said. "What do we do first?" Elena felt something loosen in her chest. "First, we get a solicitor, someone who specializes in this kind of case, someone who won't fold under pressure. I know someone, Marcus Webb. He's defended competency cases before. He's in London. Can you trust him?" "I think so. We went to school together. He's one of the few people who didn't run when the rumors started." Lucian moved to his desk, pulled out paper. "I'll write to him today." "Good. Second, we need to document everything Edmund's done, every visit, every letter, every attempt to undermine you. Mrs. Dawson has been keeping records. We'll use those. But we need more. Testimony from the staff. Financial records showing the estate is thriving under your management. Medical documentation of your condition that's accurate, not sensationalized." Lucian was writing quickly now, his handwriting sharp. "Dr. Winters, the doctor my mother brought. She was honest in her assessment. She might testify. Reach out to her. Anyone else who can speak to your competence. Business partners, estate managers, anyone. The staff here, they've been with me for years. Then we'll prepare them to testify." Elena started pacing, her mind working through angles. "We also need to know what Edmund's going to present. What doctors he's hired. What witnesses he's calling. Is there any way to find that out?" Lucian looked up from his writing. "Not legally." Elena met his eyes. "I didn't ask if it was legal." A slow smile crossed Lucian's face, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him in days. "Edmund uses the same solicitor for all his legal affairs. A man named Graves. He's not particularly discreet if you know the right taverns. Can we get to him? I can try. I still have a few contacts in London who owe me favors." Lucian set down his pen. "This is going to be expensive. Lawyers, investigators, bribes. It adds up." "How much do we have?" "Enough. Barely." Lucian's expression darkened. "But if we lose, the legal fees alone will cripple the estate. Edmund knows that. Even if we win, the cost of fighting might be too high." Elena thought about that. "Then we make sure the cost falls on him instead. If we can prove his petition is frivolous, malicious, we can petition the court to make him pay our legal fees." "That rarely works." "It works if the case is strong enough. If we make Edmund look like what he is, a greedy relative trying to steal from a competent man." Elena stopped pacing. "But for that to work, you can't just be competent. You have to be exceptional. We need to show the court that this estate is running better than it has in years, that your management is not just adequate, it's superior." Lucian's eyebrows rose. "How do we prove that?" "We have 3 weeks. We document everything. We get statements from tenants about improvements you've made. We show profit increases. We demonstrate that under your management, this estate has flourished." Elena met his eyes. "And we make you visible. No more hiding, no more isolation. You start acting like the duke you are, meeting with business partners, attending necessary functions, showing the world that you're not just surviving, you're succeeding." Lucian went pale. Elena, I can't. The risk of having an episode in public is a risk we'll manage. We'll control the environment, choose low-stress situations, have exit strategies. But we can't win this case by keeping you locked away. That just reinforces Edmund's narrative that you're too unstable to function in society. And if I have a seizure in front of witnesses, in front of people who'll testify against me? Elena's chest tightened. It was a real risk, a terrifying one, but hiding wouldn't work either. Then we control the narrative around it, she said. We have medical documentation ready. We explain what happened. We show that even with a neurological condition, you're still capable of managing your affairs. But Lucian, we can't win this by being afraid. Edmund is counting on your fear, on your instinct to hide. We have to do the opposite. Lucian was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. You're asking me to be brave when I don't know how. I'm asking you to trust me. Elena crossed to him, took his hands. You don't have to do this alone. We'll prepare for every contingency. We'll have plans and backup plans. But we do this together, just like we've done everything else. Lucian's hands tightened on hers. If this goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, then we'll handle it. But we're not going into this expecting to lose. We're going in expecting to destroy Edmund's case so thoroughly that he never tries this again. Lucian searched her face, looking for doubt, maybe, or fear. Elena made sure he didn't find any. Finally, he nodded. All right, we fight. We fight, Elena agreed. The next 3 weeks were brutal. They worked from dawn until midnight, every single day. Lucian wrote letters to everyone he'd done business with over the past 5 years. Elena organized the responses, categorizing them, building a picture of a duke who was not just competent, but skilled. Marcus Webb arrived from London 4 days after they sent the letter. He was younger than Elena expected, maybe 30, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner that reminded her of Lucian. Your case is stronger than Edmund probably realizes, Webb said, after reviewing their documentation. But it's going to be ugly. He'll bring doctors who'll testify that any neurological condition is inherently degenerative, that even if you're competent now, you won't be in 5 years. How do we counter that? Elena asked. By showing that the condition is managed, that there's a difference between having epilepsy and being incapacitated by it. And by making Edmund's motivation clear, this isn't about concern, it's about inheritance. Webb looked at Lucian. I need to be honest, you're going to be on the stand. They're going to ask invasive questions about your health, your episodes, your ability to manage stress, and you'll have to answer them calmly and coherently. Can you do that? Lucian's jaw tightened. I don't know. Then we practice. Webb pulled out a sheet of questions. Starting now. They spent hours drilling, Webb asking brutal questions, Lucian answering, Elena watching for signs of strain. It was excruciating. Watching Lucian describe his seizures in clinical detail, watching him admit to memory gaps and confusion and vulnerability, everything he'd spent years hiding, but slowly he got better at it. Found a way to talk about his condition without sounding defensive or ashamed. Started framing it the way Elena had been teaching him, as something he managed, not something that controlled him. 2 weeks in, they got their first break. Lucian's contact in London came through. Edmund's solicitor, Mr. Graves, liked to drink, and when he drank, he talked. The information that came back was damning. Edmund had hired 3 doctors to testify. 2 of them had never examined Lucian. One had a reputation for being willing to say whatever his clients paid him to say. Edmund had also compiled a list of witnesses, servants who'd been dismissed from the estate years ago for theft, distant relatives who'd been denied loans, people with grudges. This is good, Webb said when Elena showed him the information. This is very good. If we can prove Edmund's doctors are hired guns and his witnesses are biased, it undermines his entire case. How do we prove it? Lucian asked. We investigate them, find out who else they've testified for, whether their testimony has been challenged before, whether they have financial relationships with Edmund beyond this case. Webb grinned. It's going to cost money, but it's worth it. They hired investigators, spent money they couldn't really afford, and slowly, piece by piece, they built a counter case. But the stress was taking its toll. Lucian was sleeping poorly, eating irregularly. Elena watched him like a hawk, trying to manage his triggers, but there were too many. The constant preparation, The drilling, the pressure of the looming hearing. One night, 2 weeks before the court date, Elena found him in the library at 3 in the morning. He wasn't reading, just sitting in the dark, staring at nothing. "You should be sleeping," Elena said. "Can't." Lucian's voice was hollow. "Every time I close my eyes, I see the courtroom. I hear Edmund's lawyers tearing me apart. I watch myself seize in front of judges and lose everything." Elena sat beside him. "That's not going to happen." "You don't know that. I know that we've prepared better than Edmund has. I know that we have the truth on our side. I know that you're stronger than he thinks you are." "Am I?" Lucian looked at her, and Elena saw exhaustion written in every line of his face. "Because right now I feel like I'm barely holding on. Like one more thing, just one more thing, and I'm going to shatter." Elena's throat tightened. He was right on the edge. She could see it, feel it. "Then we stop," she said. Lucian blinked. "What?" "We stop preparing. For tonight, we stop thinking about the case. We stop drilling. We stop strategizing. We just..." Elena searched for the word. "We just exist." "Elena, we have 2 weeks, and you're going to burn out before we get there if you don't rest." Elena stood, held out her hand. "Come with me." Lucian looked at her hand like it was a foreign object. Then slowly, he took it. Elena led him outside. The night was clear, cold, the sky full of stars. They walked through the grounds in silence, their breath misting in the air. Finally, Elena said, "Tell me something that has nothing to do with the case." "Like what?" "Anything, a memory, a thought, something that isn't legal strategy or medical testimony." Lucian was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "When I was 14, before the seizures started, I wanted to be an astronomer." Elena glanced at him. "Really? I had a telescope, used to sneak out at night and map constellations. My tutor said I was good at it, that I had an eye for patterns." Lucian looked up at the sky. "Then the seizures started and my mother took the telescope away. She said I'd hurt myself climbing around in the dark." "That must have been hard." "It was the first thing I lost. Not the last, but the first. It taught me that every time something went wrong with my condition, something else would be taken away. Eventually I stopped wanting things. It was easier than losing them." Elena stopped walking. "Is that why you never tried to fight back before? Against Edmund, your mother, all of them?" "Partly." Lucian's voice was quiet. "And partly because I believe them. When everyone tells you you're broken, you start to think they're right." "And now?" Lucian looked at her. "Now I have someone who tells me I'm not. It's harder to believe the old voices when yours is louder." Elena felt her chest tighten. "Lucian, I'm going to lose you, aren't I?" The words came out raw, desperate. "If we lose this case, Edmund will take the estate. You'll leave. Go back to London. Find a life that isn't chained to a man who can't even keep his own family from destroying him." "I'm not leaving." "You should. You could get an annulment, claim the marriage was under duress." "I'm not leaving." Elena grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. "Do you understand? Whatever happens in that courtroom, wherever we end up, I'm not abandoning you. Not like your mother, not like anyone else. We're in this together, and that doesn't change based on a court ruling." Lucian stared at her. Then, slowly, he brought his hands up to cover hers. "Why?" "Because you're not broken. Because this life, this strange, complicated, impossible life, is better than anything I had before. Because..." Elena stopped, searching for words that felt true. "Because you're the first person who's ever treated me like I matter. Not as a burden or a bargaining chip or a problem to solve, just as someone who exists and has value. And I'm not walking away from that." Lucian's eyes were bright. "Elena, He never finished the sentence. A sound erupted from the direction of the manor, sharp, violent, unmistakable, glass shattering. They ran. The library window was broken. Shards of glass littered the floor, glinting in the moonlight. And in the middle of the room, burning quietly on the carpet, was a torch. Beside it, tied to a rock, was a note. Elena grabbed the torch, threw it into the fireplace before the carpet could catch. Then she picked up the note with shaking hands. "Stop the petition, or the next fire won't be so small. No signature." But the threat was clear. Lucian stood frozen in the doorway, his face white. Edmund, we don't know that. Who else would it be? Lucian's voice was shaking. He's not going to let this go to court. He's going to destroy everything before we get the chance to defend ourselves. Elena stared at the note. Her hands were trembling with rage and fear in equal measure. This wasn't just about a court case anymore. This was about survival. We need to call the magistrate, she said. Report this, get it documented. And say what? That we think Edmund threw a torch through our window with no proof? Lucian was pacing now, his control fracturing. He'll deny it. Say it was vandals, sympathetic locals who don't want a madman running the estate, and the magistrate will probably believe him. Then Elena stopped. What could they do? Press forward with the case while waiting for the next attack? Back down and let Edmund win? Neither option was acceptable. We need to go to London, she said suddenly. Lucian looked at her like she'd lost her mind. What? We go to London. Now. Tonight. We take all our documentation, all our evidence, and we go to your solicitor. We move up the timeline. We force Edmund to respond before he's ready instead of sitting here waiting for him to burn us out. We can't just show up at court. We're not going to court. We're going to the judges directly. We petition for an emergency hearing based on threats to your person and property. We make Edmund defend his actions instead of us defending yours. Lucian stared at her. That's insane. That's tactical. Elena's mind was racing now, seeing angles, possibilities. Edmund thinks we're scared, that this threat will make us back down. We do the opposite. We show up in London and force his hand, make him scramble, make him make mistakes. Or we walk into a trap. Maybe, but sitting here waiting for the next attack is definitely a trap. Elena grabbed his shoulders. I'm not letting him win by default. If we're going to lose, we lose fighting, but we don't give up. Lucian looked at the broken window, at the note in Elena's hand, at the fear and determination warring in her expression. All right, he said finally. We go to London. They left within the hour. Mrs. Dawson helped them pack essentials, documents, clothes, Lucian's medical records. The staff moved quickly, quietly, understanding without being told that something had shifted. The carriage rolled down the drive just as dawn broke. Elena sat across from Lucian, watching his face in the growing light. He looked terrified, determined, angry, good. Anger was better than resignation. Whatever happens, Elena said quietly, we face it together. Lucian nodded, his hand found hers across the space between them. Together, he repeated. The carriage picked up speed, leaving Blackridge Manor behind. And ahead of them, London waited. With courtrooms and enemies and a battle neither of them was sure they could win, but they were going to try. London hit them like a wall. The noise, the crowds, the stench of coal smoke and horses, and too many people crammed into too little space. Everything Elena had forgotten about the city came rushing back the moment their carriage rolled through the outskirts. Lucian went rigid beside her. I haven't been here in 6 years, he said quietly. His eyes tracked the chaos outside the window. Vendors shouting, carriages jostling for space, people everywhere. I forgot how much I hate it. We don't have to stay long. Elena kept her voice calm, but she was watching him carefully. Every muscle in his body was tense, just long enough to file the petition and meet with Webb. And if I have an episode here, in the middle of the street, then we handle it. But Lucian, you've been managing stress for weeks. You can manage this. He didn't look convinced. They'd sent a messenger ahead, so Marcus Webb was waiting when they arrived at his office near Lincoln's Inn. He took one look at their faces and ushered them inside immediately. What happened? He asked, closing the door. Elena handed him the note. This came through our library window last night, tied to a torch. Webb read it, his expression darkening. Edmund? We think so, but we can't prove it. Then we don't need to prove it. We just need to make the court aware that there are threats. Webb set the note down carefully. This changes things. If we can demonstrate that you're being coerced or intimidated, it strengthens our position, shows Edmund's petition isn't about concern, it's about forcing you out. Can we get an emergency hearing? Elena asked. Webb considered. Possibly. The courts don't like dragging these cases out, especially when property and titles are involved. But it's risky. If we push too hard, too fast, we might trigger exactly the kind of public spectacle Edmund wants. A duke defending his competence in an emergency proceeding? That's going to draw attention. Good, Elena said. Let it draw attention. Let people see what Edmund's doing. Let them see Lucien defend himself coherently and completely destroy the narrative that he's unstable. Or, Webb said carefully, they see a duke under enough stress that he can't maintain composure, and Edmund wins by default. The room fell silent. Lucien stood and walked to the window. Below, London churned and roiled. He's going to win either way, isn't he? If I hide, I look incompetent. If I fight publicly and falter, I prove his case. Not if we control the circumstances, Elena said. She looked at Webb. What if we don't wait for a hearing? What if we go directly to Edmund? Both men stared at her. Explain, Webb said. Elena's mind was working through possibilities, angles, weaknesses. Edmund wants this to go to court because he thinks he can manipulate the proceedings. Hired doctors, biased witnesses, public spectacle. But what if we force a private mediation first? Just Edmund, his solicitor, us, and an independent medical examiner. No courtroom drama, no public humiliation, just facts. Edmund won't agree to that, Lucien said. He will if we make it worth his while. Elena turned to Webb. Can you arrange a meeting? Present it as a good faith effort to resolve this without destroying the family's reputation? Appeal to his sense of propriety? Webb's expression was skeptical. Edmund doesn't have a sense of propriety. He has a sense of opportunity. Then we make it an opportunity. We tell him that if he agrees to mediation and we reach a settlement, we won't pursue legal action over the threats to our property. We won't make his intimidation tactics public. You're offering him amnesty for attempted arson in exchange for a meeting? Webb's eyebrows rose. That's bold. That's strategy. Elena met his eyes. Edmund wants to win, but he doesn't want to look like a villain. If we give him a way to save face while still getting what he wants, or thinking he's getting what he wants, he'll take it. Lucien turned from the window. And what happens when we get in the room with him and he realizes we're not rolling over? Then we have him trapped in a private setting where he can't perform for an audience, where it's just us, the facts, and an independent examiner who isn't on his payroll. Elena's voice was steady. We make him defend his petition instead of us defending you. Webb was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. It could work. It's risky, but it could work. I'll reach out to Edmund's solicitor today. Present it as damage control. Avoid a messy public case. Resolve this quietly, like civilized people. How long will it take? Elena asked. If Edmund's smart, he'll agree immediately. Having you in London, willing to negotiate? That's what he wants. He'll see it as weakness. Webb looked at Lucien, which means you need to be anything but weak when we get in that room. Lucien's jaw tightened. I'll be ready. They found lodgings in a quiet townhouse near Bloomsbury. Lucien hated it. Too many sounds, too much light filtering through curtains that didn't quite close. But it was better than staying in a hotel where every servant would gossip about the Mad Duke being back in London. Elena spent the first night making lists. Everything they needed to present in mediation. Every piece of documentation. Every counterargument to whatever Edmund would throw at them. Lucien tried to help but gave up after an hour. He was too tense, too aware of every noise from the street outside. I can't think here, he said finally. It's too much. Elena looked up from her papers. He was pacing, a bad sign. When Lucien paced, it meant he was losing control of his careful management strategies. Come here, she said. He stopped. What? Come sit down. We're not working anymore tonight. Elena, we have maybe 2 days before, and you're going to be useless in that meeting if you don't sleep. Elena set down her pen. Come here. Reluctantly, Lucien sat beside her on the small sofa. His hands were shaking slightly. Elena took them in hers, warming them. Tell me what you're feeling, she said, like I'm about to crawl out of my skin. Lucien's voice was tight. Like every sound is too loud and every light is too bright, and I can't manage this the way I need to. Then don't manage it. Just feel it. Lucien looked at her like she'd suggested he'd jump off a bridge. If I stop managing, I'll fall apart. Or, Elena said carefully, you'll just be uncomfortable for a while. And then it will pass. Not everything is a crisis, Lucien. Sometimes stress is just stress. Easy for you to say. It's not easy, but it's true. Elena squeezed his hands. You've spent so long treating every moment of discomfort like it's a warning sign of something catastrophic, but sometimes you're just tired, or overwhelmed, or in a city you hate, and that's allowed. Lucian stared at their joined hands. I don't know how to not be afraid. I know, but you don't have to be fearless. You just have to keep moving forward. Elena leaned against him slightly. And you don't have to do it alone. Lucian's arm came around her shoulders, pulling her closer. They sat like that in the dim lamplight, listening to London settling into night outside. After a while, Lucian said, "What if we lose? Then we figure out what comes next." There might not be a next. Edmund could what? Take the estate? Fine. We'll find somewhere else to live. Strip you of the title? It's just a word. The only thing that actually matters is that we're still standing when this is over. Everything else we can rebuild. Lucian was quiet. Then, very softly, "When did you get so brave?" "I'm not brave. I'm stubborn. There's a difference." Elena tilted her head to look at him. "But I meant what I said before. I'm not leaving. Whatever happens in that mediation, whatever Edmund throws at us, we face it together. That doesn't change." Lucian's hand came up to cup her face. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, that same careful touch from weeks ago, but less hesitant now, more certain. "I don't deserve you," he said quietly. "Stop saying that." Elena's voice was fierce. "You deserve someone who stays, who fights, who doesn't run when things get hard. And that's exactly what you have." Lucian's eyes searched hers. Then, slowly, he leaned down and kissed her. It was tentative at first. A question, not a demand. Elena answered by kissing him back, her hands moving to his shoulders, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, Lucian rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he whispered. "I don't know when it happened, but it did. And I needed you to know before whatever happens in that room." Elena's chest tightened. She'd known, somewhere deep down, had felt it building over weeks of late nights in the library, of fighting battles side by side, of learning each other's edges and weaknesses and strengths. "I love you too," she said, "which is why we're going to win. Because I'm not losing you to Edmund's greed and manipulation. Not now. Not ever." Lucian kissed her again, deeper this time, and Elena felt something shift between them. This wasn't just partnership anymore, wasn't just survival. This was something they'd built deliberately, carefully, in the spaces between crisis and calm. This was theirs, and no one was taking it away. The message came the next morning. Edmund had agreed to mediation. Tomorrow, 2:00, at his solicitor's office. An independent medical examiner had been arranged, Dr. Philip Ashford, who had a reputation for being scrupulously neutral. "This is good," Webb said when they met to discuss strategy. "Ashford won't be swayed by money or pressure. If he says you're competent, Edmund's petition collapses." "And if he says I'm not?" Lucian asked. "Then we're in the same position we'd be in at a hearing, except without the public spectacle." Webb laid out documents across his desk. "But that's not going to happen. We have documentation, testimony, evidence of competent management. Ashford will see that." "Edmund will bring his own evidence," Elena said. "Let him. We'll dismantle it point by point." Webb looked at Lucian. "You need to be calm tomorrow. Articulate. Don't get defensive when they attack your condition. Just state facts." "I've been practicing for weeks," Lucian said. His voice was steady, but Elena saw the tension in his shoulders. "Practice is different from performance." Webb's tone was gentle. "Edmund is going to try to provoke you, to trigger exactly the kind of breakdown he's claiming makes you incompetent. Don't give him that satisfaction." "I won't." "Good." Webb gathered the documents. "Then we're as ready as we're going to be." That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through every possible scenario. What Edmund might say, how they'd counter, what Dr. Ashford might ask. Around 2 a.m, she heard Lucian moving in the next room. She got up and found him sitting at the small desk, writing. His handwriting was sharp, controlled, covering page after page. "What are you doing?" Elena asked. Lucian looked up. "Writing down everything I want to say tomorrow. Everything I've been holding back for years. About my mother leaving, about Edmund circling like a vulture, about living in isolation because it was safer than being vulnerable." He set down the pen. "I'm not going to say any of it. But I needed to write it down, to remember why I'm fighting. Elena crossed to him, read over his shoulder. The words were raw, angry, honest. Everything Lucian kept buried beneath his careful control. "You should say it," she said. Lucian shook his head. "That's not how this works. Emotion loses in mediation. Logic wins. Sometimes emotion is logical." Elena pulled up a chair beside him. "Edmund thinks you're weak because you have a condition, but you're not weak. You're surviving something that would have destroyed most people, and that takes strength. Let them see that." "I can't fall apart in front of them." "I'm not asking you to fall apart. I'm asking you to be honest. To stop performing the version of yourself you think they need to see, and just be who you are." Elena met his eyes. "You've spent years hiding because you thought vulnerability was weakness. But it's not. It's human. And right now, that's exactly what Edmund doesn't want them to see. That you're human, not broken." Lucian stared at her. "You're asking me to take the biggest risk of my life. I'm asking you to trust yourself, and to trust that the truth is stronger than Edmund's lies." Lucian looked down at the pages he'd written. Then, slowly, he nodded. "All right, I'll try." Edmund's solicitor's office was in a building near Gray's Inn, all dark wood and hushed voices and the smell of old paper and older money. They were shown to a conference room on the second floor. Edmund was already there, sitting at one end of a long table. His solicitor, Mr. Graves, sat beside him. And at the head of the table sat Dr. Philip Ashford, a man in his 60s with sharp eyes and an expression that gave nothing away. Edmund smiled when they entered. It was the smile of a predator who thought he'd already won. "Nephew, how kind of you to come to London. I know how difficult travel can be for you." The words were honeyed poison. Lucian's jaw tightened, but he didn't rise to the bait. "Uncle," he said neutrally. "Shall we begin?" Dr. Ashford gestured for them to sit. "I've reviewed the petition Lord Edmund filed, as well as the preliminary documentation from both sides. This mediation is intended to determine whether there's merit to the claim that the Duke is unable to manage his own affairs due to medical incapacity." He looked at Lucian. "Your Grace, I'll need to ask you some questions. Some may be uncomfortable. I ask that you answer honestly and completely." "I will," Lucian said. "Good." Ashford pulled out a file. "Let's start with your medical history. You were diagnosed with epilepsy at age 16. "Yes." "And you've had multiple seizures since then?" "Yes. Roughly one every few months, sometimes less frequently, depending on circumstances." "What kind of circumstances?" Lucian took a breath. Elena felt his hand find hers under the table, squeezing once, grounding himself. "Stress is the primary trigger," Lucian said, "particularly stress related to family conflict. I've also found that lack of sleep, certain patterns of light, and irregular eating can contribute. When I manage those factors carefully, the seizures are less frequent." "So you're able to manage the condition to some degree?" "Yes." Edmund leaned forward. "Tell Dr. Ashford about the episode last week, when your mother visited." Lucian's expression didn't change, but Elena felt his hand tighten on hers. "I had a seizure the evening my mother left. It lasted approximately 4 minutes. I was disoriented for about an hour afterward." "And what triggered it?" Ashford asked. 3 days of sustained stress from my mother's visit, and the threat of this petition. My uncle's earlier visit. The accumulation of family members attempting to prove I was incompetent while I tried to demonstrate otherwise." Lucian's voice was steady. "It wasn't random. It was predictable." "You're saying the stress of defending yourself caused the seizure?" "I'm saying that being under constant siege by family members who want to take control of my estate caused enough accumulated stress that my carefully managed condition became temporarily unmanageable." "Yes." Ashford made notes. "Walk me through a typical day at your estate. How do you manage your responsibilities?" Lucian did. He described his routines, his strategies, the way he'd structured his life to minimize triggers while still running the estate effectively. He talked about correspondence, financial management, tenant relations, all the work he did that no one saw. Elena watched Edmund's face darken as Lucian spoke. This wasn't the broken, incompetent Duke he'd been expecting. "Let's talk about decision-making," Ashford said. "Lord Edmund's petition suggests that you've made questionable financial choices. Can you speak to that?" "I can. Lucian pulled out a ledger. My uncle is referring to investments I made in railway expansion and textile manufacturing. Both have returned significant profit. I can provide documentation. The investments were risky, Graves interjected. Unusual for someone in the Duke's position. The investments were strategic, Elena said. Everyone turned to look at her. I've reviewed the estate's finances extensively. Every investment the Duke made was researched, calculated, and documented. The returns speak for themselves. And you are? Ashford asked. The Duchess, Elena Blackridge. Ah. Ashford's expression shifted slightly. Curiosity, maybe. You've been involved in managing the estate? Since our marriage 6 months ago, yes. I've worked with the Duke on financial planning, household management, and strategic decision-making. Elena met his eyes. I can say without hesitation that he is not only competent, he's exceptional. The estate is thriving under his management. Edmund's smile was cold. Of course you'd say that. You're married to him. You benefit from maintaining the status quo. I benefit from living with someone who's intelligent, capable, and treating me as an equal partner rather than a burden, Elena shot back. Unlike the family members who abandoned him the moment his condition became inconvenient. The temperature in the room dropped. That's out of line, Graves said. Is it? Let's talk about what's out of line. Elena pulled out papers. Lord Edmund has visited the estate 4 times in the past year. Each visit was followed by a seizure. That's not coincidence. That's targeted harassment designed to destabilize the Duke. And last week, someone threw a torch through our library window with a threatening note. We can't prove it was Lord Edmund, but the timing is suggestive. Edmund's face went red. I had nothing to do with that. Then who did? Elena's voice was sharp. Who else benefits from intimidating us into dropping our defense? Who else has been systematically trying to prove incompetence where none exists? This is absurd, is it? Dr. Ashford, I have documentation here of every visit Lord Edmund has made to our estate, every letter he sent, every attempt to undermine the Duke's management, and I have medical records showing that every single seizure in the past year corresponds to family interference, not random episodes, not uncontrollable degeneration, family-induced stress. She slid the papers across the table. Ashford took them, reading carefully. His expression was unreadable. This is quite detailed, he said finally. We've been keeping records, Elena said, because we knew this was coming. We knew Lord Edmund would try to paint these episodes as evidence of incompetence rather than what they actually are, a medical response to sustained psychological attack. Edmund stood abruptly. This is outrageous. You're suggesting that I've been deliberately harassing your nephew to create evidence for your petition? Yes, that's exactly what I'm suggesting. Elena stood as well. And I'm prepared to testify to it in court if this mediation doesn't resolve matters. The room fell silent. Ashford set down the papers. Lord Edmund, I'd like to ask you some questions now. Edmund looked like he wanted to refuse, but Graves put a hand on his arm, and Edmund sat slowly. When did you last speak with the Duke before filing this petition? Ashford asked. I visited his estate several weeks ago. And what was your impression of his competence at that time? Edmund hesitated. He seemed functional, but appearances can be deceiving. Can they? Or were you hoping to find evidence of incompetence and disappointed when you didn't? Ashford's voice was mild, but the question landed like a blade. I was concerned for my nephew's well-being. Were you concerned enough to offer support? To help manage the stress you claim is affecting him so severely? Or did you simply file a legal petition and wait for him to collapse under the pressure? Edmund's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Ashford turned back to Lucian. Your Grace, I have one more question. If I were to rule that you are competent to manage your affairs, what would you do differently going forward? Lucian was quiet for a moment. Elena saw him gathering himself, choosing his words carefully. Then he said, I'd stop hiding. I've spent 6 years isolated at my estate because I thought that was the only way to manage my condition safely. But isolation has its own costs. It's made me vulnerable to exactly this kind of attack. So if I'm given the chance, I'd start engaging with the world again. Carefully. With support. But I'd stop treating my condition like something shameful that needs to be locked away. Ashford's expression softened slightly. That's a very honest answer. My wife taught me that honesty is stronger than hiding. Lucian glanced at Elena. She's usually right. Ashford made more notes. Then he set down his pen and looked around the table. I've heard enough, he said. I'll need a few hours to review all the documentation, but I'm prepared to make a preliminary assessment. Lord Edmund, I find your petition to be without merit. The Duke is clearly competent to manage his affairs. He has a medical condition, yes, but it's well controlled and does not impair his judgment or decision-making capacity. Furthermore, I'm troubled by the pattern of family interference that appears to be exacerbating his condition rather than supporting his management of it. Edmund went pale. I can and I am. Ashford's voice was firm. My preliminary recommendation to the court will be to dismiss your petition. If you wish to challenge that recommendation, you're welcome to request a full hearing. But I should warn you, if this goes to court and the evidence of harassment the Duchess has compiled comes to light, you may find yourself facing legal consequences beyond simply losing the case. The silence that followed was absolute. Elena felt Lucian's hand shake in hers, not from fear or stress, but from something that might have been relief. Edmund looked at Graves. Graves looked at the papers in front of him. Neither spoke. Finally, Edmund said quietly, I withdraw the petition. Ashford nodded. A wise choice. I'll file the paperwork this afternoon. He stood. Your Grace, Duchess, congratulations. You've defended yourselves admirably. He left. Graves followed quickly, gathering papers. Edmund remained seated, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. This isn't over, he said quietly. Yes, Lucian said. His voice was steady, calm, and completely unbowed. It is. You've tried twice now to prove I'm incompetent. You've failed twice. If you try again, we'll pursue legal action for harassment, and this time we'll have Dr. Ashford's assessment to back us up. So please, try again. I'd enjoy watching you lose a third time. Edmund's jaw tightened. Then without another word, he stood and left. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Elena and Lucian sat in silence for a long moment. Then Lucian started laughing. It was quiet at first, almost disbelieving. Then louder, edged with relief and exhaustion, and something that might have been joy. Elena started laughing too. They sat there in that stuffy conference room, holding hands across the table, laughing like they'd lost their minds. Marcus Webb found them 5 minutes later, still laughing, tears streaming down their faces. I take it the mediation went well? He asked dryly. Edmund withdrew the petition, Elena managed between gasps. Ashford ruled in our favor. Webb's expression transformed into something that might have been the closest he came to a smile. I'll file the dismissal paperwork immediately, and I'll make sure copies go to every solicitor in London. Edmund won't be able to try this again without everyone knowing he's already lost once. Thank you, Lucian said. His voice was hoarse from laughing. For everything. Thank your wife, Webb said. That documentation she compiled, that's what turned the case. Ashford would have ruled you competent anyway based on your testimony, but showing the pattern of harassment, that's what made Edmund withdraw instead of dragging this to court. Elena felt her chest tighten. I just did what needed to be done. No, Lucian said quietly. You did what no one else would have. You fought when everyone expected me to fold. You saw patterns I was too close to see. His voice cracked slightly. You saved me. Again. Elena squeezed his hand. We saved each other. That's what partners do. Webb cleared his throat. Well, if you two are done being disgustingly devoted to each other, we should celebrate. There's a tavern near here that serves excellent whiskey. I don't drink, Lucian said. Then you can watch us drink. Come on. You just won your life back. That deserves some recognition. They ended up at a small tavern in a side street, tucked away from the chaos of London proper. Webb bought rounds for the table, whiskey for himself and Elena, water for Lucian. To competence, Webb said, raising his glass, and to people stubborn enough to prove it. To stubborn people, Elena agreed. They drank. The whiskey burned going down, but Elena didn't care. They'd won. Against Edmund, against the courts, against every expectation. Lucian sat beside her, his hand resting on her knee under the table. He looked lighter than she'd ever seen him, like a weight had been lifted that he'd been carrying for years. What happens now? Elena asked. Now, Lucian said, We go home. We rebuild the library window. We live our lives without looking over our shoulders, waiting for the next attack. He met her eyes. We figure out what we want instead of just surviving what we don't. That sounds nice. It does, doesn't it? Lucian's hand tightened on her knee. Thank you for everything. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. For fighting when I wanted to give up. For... Elena kissed him, cutting off the gratitude. When she pulled back, she said, "Stop thanking me. We're partners. This is what we do. We fight together. We win together. We rebuild together." Lucian smiled, genuinely, openly, without any of the careful control he usually maintained. Together. Webb watched them with something that might have been approval. "You two are going to be insufferable, aren't you?" "Probably," Elena said. "Good. You've earned it." They stayed at the tavern until evening, talking about everything and nothing, making plans for returning to the estate, discussing which rooms needed updating, which staff needed raises, how to handle any lingering attempts from Edmund to cause trouble. It felt surreal, talking about the future like it was something they actually had, like they weren't just surviving crisis to crisis anymore. When they finally left, London was settling into dusk. The streets were crowded, noisy, chaotic, but it didn't feel overwhelming anymore. Lucian took Elena's hand as they walked back to their lodgings. "I was thinking," he said, "about what I said in mediation, about stopping hiding." "You meant it?" "I think so. I'm not sure I'm ready for London society or anything that public. But maybe we could host something at the estate, small, just a few business associates, some of the local gentry. Let people see that I'm not the Mad Duke anymore. That I'm just a duke with a medical condition who's running his estate competently," Elena finished. "I think that's a good idea." "You'd help me plan it?" "Of course. We'll do it together." Elena squeezed his hand. Everything together. They reached their lodgings as full darkness fell. Inside, the silence felt different than it had before. Not oppressive, just quiet, peaceful. Lucian pulled Elena close, holding her against him. "I love you," he said quietly. "I know I said it before, but I need you to know I mean it, completely, without reservation." "I know," Elena said. "I love you too. And I'm not going anywhere." They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the dim lamplight. Then Lucian said, "We should probably write to Mrs. Dawson. Let her know we won. Tomorrow. Tonight, we just exist." Elena pulled back enough to look at him. No strategy, no planning, no thinking about what comes next, just this. Lucian smiled. "I can do that." And for the first time since that cold March wedding, they did. They existed, together, without fear or hiding or the weight of impending crisis. Just two people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances imaginable and built something strong enough to survive. Something that looked remarkably like love. The journey back to Blackridge Manor felt different. The same roads, the same forests pressing in on either side, the same rhythmic sound of horses' hooves on packed earth. But Elena felt the weight that had been crushing them for months finally lift. Lucian sat across from her, staring out the window with an expression she'd never seen before. Not quite peace, but something close to it, like he was trying to remember what it felt like to breathe without bracing for the next blow. "You're quiet," Elena said. Lucian turned to look at her. "I keep expecting something else to go wrong, another letter, another threat, another family member crawling out of the woodwork to prove I'm unfit." "It's over, Lucian." "Is it?" His voice was uncertain. "Edmund withdrew the petition, but that doesn't mean he's given up. That doesn't mean... It means we won." Elena leaned forward. "And more importantly, it means we have legal documentation proving you're competent. If Edmund tries anything else, we have Dr. Ashford's assessment. We have Webb ready to file harassment charges. We have leverage now, real leverage." Lucian absorbed this slowly. "I've never had leverage before." "You have it now, and we're going to use it." Elena's voice was firm. "No more playing defense, no more waiting for attacks. We're rebuilding on our terms." A small smile crossed Lucian's face. "Our terms, I like the sound of that." "Good, because I have ideas." "Why doesn't that surprise me?" Elena grinned. "First, we're hosting that gathering you mentioned. Small, controlled, but visible. Show the local gentry that you're not hiding anymore. Second, we're cutting off Edmund completely. No more letters, no more visits, nothing. He lost his right to access when he tried to have you declared incompetent. And third, she paused, considering. Third, we stop managing your condition like it's a shameful secret. We acknowledge it exists. We have strategies for it. We don't apologize for it. Lucian's expression was complicated. You're asking me to be open about something I've hidden for 6 years. I'm asking you to stop letting fear control your life. You have epilepsy, that's a fact. But it doesn't define you, and it doesn't make you incompetent. The more we act like it's something to hide, the more power we give people like Edmund to use it against you. And if people judge me for it, then they're idiots, and we don't need them in our lives. Elena's voice was matter-of-fact. You can't control what people think, but you can control whether you give them power over you, and right now, you're giving them too much. Lucian was quiet for a long time, then he said, When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just tired of watching you suffer for something that isn't your fault. Elena reached across the space between them, took his hand. You deserve better than the life you've been living, and I'm going to make sure you get it. Lucian's fingers laced through hers. We're going to make sure. Together. Together, Elena agreed. They arrived at the manor just as the sun was setting. Mrs. Dawson stood in the doorway, her usually stern expression softening when she saw them. Your Graces, she said as they climbed down from the carriage, we received your letter. The staff is very pleased with the news. Thank you, Mrs. Dawson. Lucian looked up at the manor, his home secure now in a way it hadn't been for months. It's good to be back. Indeed, I've had the library window repaired and there's a letter waiting for you. It arrived this morning. Elena felt Lucian tense beside her. From whom? Your mother, I believe. The moment fractured. Lucian's expression went carefully blank. That same defensive emptiness Elena had learned to recognize as his way of bracing for pain. Burn it, he said. Mrs. Dawson blinked. Your Grace? Burn the letter. I don't want to read it. Lucian, Elena started. No. His voice was flat. She left. She chose to leave rather than deal with the reality of my condition. She doesn't get to come back now that the crisis is resolved and pretend she cares. Burn it. Mrs. Dawson looked at Elena, uncertain. Elena nodded slightly. As you wish, Your Grace, Mrs. Dawson said quietly and disappeared back into the house. Elena turned to Lucian. You didn't even want to know what it said? I know what it says. Congratulations on the ruling. Relief that the family name is secure. Perhaps a vague expression of regret that doesn't actually acknowledge what she did. Lucian's jaw was tight. I don't need her validation, not anymore. Elena studied him. This wasn't anger. This was something colder, more final. A door closing. Are you sure? She asked gently. Yes. Lucian met her eyes. You asked me to stop letting fear control my life. Part of that is stopping the cycle with my family. They've used obligation and guilt to manipulate me for years. My mother abandoned me, but I still answered her letters because I thought I owed her something. Edmund tried to destroy me, but I let him visit because I thought family was supposed to matter. I'm done with that. They don't get access to my life anymore. Elena felt something loosen in her chest. This was the Lucian she'd been hoping would emerge. Not the careful defensive man who'd married her out of desperation, but someone who knew his own worth and wasn't afraid to protect it. Then we're done with them, she said simply. All of them. Lucian exhaled slowly. That easy? That easy. Elena took his hand. Now, come inside. We have a manor to reclaim. The next 2 weeks were a blur of activity. Elena threw herself into planning the gathering with the same intensity she'd brought to defeating Edmund. She consulted with Mrs. Dawson about menus and arrangements, wrote invitations to carefully selected guests, local business partners, a few progressive members of the gentry who'd expressed interest in Lucian's investments, people who valued competence over gossip. Lucian resisted at first. I don't know if I'm ready for this. You're ready, Elena said firmly, and I'll be beside you the entire time. If you need to step away, we'll have exit strategies. But Lucian, you can't hide forever. At some point, you have to show people that you're not what the rumors claim. What if I have an episode during the gathering? Then we handle it. We have Dr. Winters' assessment. We have documentation of your condition, and more importantly, we have 24 witnesses who will see that even with a medical event, you're still the same intelligent, capable man you were before it happened. Elena held his gaze. The only way to defeat the stigma is to stop hiding from it. Lucian looked terrified, but he nodded. All right, we do this. The invitations went out. Responses came back, some enthusiastic, some cautious, but all acceptances. Apparently word had spread about Edmund's failed petition. People were curious. Good. Let them be curious. Let them see the truth. 3 days before the gathering, another letter arrived. This one was from Catherine, Lucian's mother. It had been forwarded from London, marked urgent. Lucian stared at it like it was a snake. I told her I didn't want to hear from her. Maybe you should read it, Elena said carefully, just to know what she wants. I know what she wants. Absolution. Permission to pretend the past 6 years didn't happen. Then tell her no, but at least read it first. Lucian's hands shook slightly as he broke the seal. Elena watched his face as he read, saw confusion, then disbelief, then something that might have been pain. What is it? She asked. Lucian handed her the letter wordlessly. Elena read, Lucian, I know you don't wish to hear from me. I know I have no right to ask for your attention after what I've done. But I'm writing anyway because you deserve an explanation, even if it's 6 years too late. I was terrified. When your seizure started, when the doctors couldn't give me answers that made sense, when society began whispering, I was terrified in a way I'd never been before. Not of you. Of failing you. Of not being strong enough to protect you from a world that wouldn't try to understand. So I ran. I told myself you'd be better off with specialists, with distance from my panic. I told myself many lies, and I believed them because the alternative was admitting that I'd abandoned my son when he needed me most. I heard about Edmund's petition, about the mediation, about how you and your wife fought and won, and I realized that while I was hiding from my failures, you were building a life without me. A good life, by all accounts. With someone who did what I couldn't, stayed. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking to be welcomed back into your life. I'm simply asking you to know that I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry, and that I'm proud of you for becoming the man you are despite the mother you deserved and didn't get. Your mother, Catherine Elena, set the letter down carefully. That's not what I expected. Neither did I. Lucian's voice was hollow. Is it supposed to make me feel better? That she's sorry now? That she's proud now that I've proven I don't need her? I don't think it's supposed to make you feel anything. I think it's just the truth. Elena looked at him. What do you want to do? Lucian stared at the letter. I don't know. Part of me wants to write back, to accept her apology, to try to rebuild something, and part of me just wants to let it go, to acknowledge that she's sorry, but that sorry doesn't undo 6 years of abandonment. Both of those are valid, Elena said quietly. Are they? Because they feel contradictory. You can acknowledge her apology without letting her back into your life. You can accept that she's sorry while also protecting yourself from being hurt again. Elena moved closer. This isn't all or nothing. You get to decide what level of contact you're comfortable with. Maybe that's nothing. Maybe it's occasional letters. Maybe it's something else. But it's your choice, not hers. Lucian was quiet for a long time. Then he folded the letter and set it aside. I'll think about it. After the gathering. Right now I need to focus on what's in front of me, not what's behind me. That sounds reasonable. Does it? Because I feel like I'm avoiding making a decision. You're prioritizing, Elena corrected. There's a difference. One crisis at a time. Lucian almost smiled. Is hosting a gathering really a crisis? For you? Probably. Fair point. The day of the gathering arrived gray and threatening rain. Elena woke early, her stomach tight with nerves. This mattered, not just for Lucian's reputation, but for his sense of self. He needed to prove, to himself more than anyone, that he could function in society, that his condition didn't make him less than. She found him in the library, already dressed, staring at the repaired window. You look terrified, Elena said. I am terrified. Lucian didn't turn around. What if I can't do this? What if the stress of having people here, of performing normalcy for hours, triggers an episode? Then we handle it. But Lucian, you've been managing stress for weeks. You survived Edmund's visits, your mother's visit, the mediation. This is nothing compared to those. Those were battles. This is visibility, being seen, being judged. Elena crossed to him, put her hands on his shoulders. You're going to be fine, and I'm going to be right beside you. If you need to step away, give me a signal. We'll make an excuse. But I think you're going to surprise yourself. I don't want to surprise myself. I want to survive the next 6 hours without collapsing. That's a reasonable goal, Elena said. Let's start there. The guests began arriving at 3. First came Lord and Lady Hartwell, a local couple who'd invested in Lucian's railway ventures. Then Mr. Camden, a business associate from London. The Thorntons, who owned the neighboring estate. Dr. Winters, who'd agreed to attend after Lucian sent her a personal invitation, thanking her for her honesty during Catherine's visit. Each arrival was carefully managed. Mrs. Dawson greeting them at the door, showing them to the drawing room where refreshments waited. Elena at Lucian's side, making introductions, keeping conversations flowing. Lucian was rigid at first. His responses were careful, measured, each word chosen precisely. But as the afternoon progressed, Elena watched him slowly relax. The conversations turned to business, investments, local improvements, things Lucian knew, things he was good at. No one asked about his condition. No one mentioned the rumors. They just talked to him like he was a person, not a diagnosis. An hour in, Lady Hartwell cornered Elena near the refreshment table. I have to say, Duchess, we were surprised to receive your invitation. Elena kept her expression neutral. Surprised? Well, given the Duke's preference for privacy, we'd heard he didn't entertain. Lady Hartwell's tone was careful, probing. The Duke has been focused on estate management, Elena said smoothly, but we felt it was time to be more engaged with our neighbors and associates. Isolation has its drawbacks. Indeed. Lady Hartwell glanced at Lucian, who was deep in conversation with Mr. Camden about textile imports. He seems well. The rumors were quite concerning. Rumors usually are, and usually inaccurate. Elena met her eyes. The Duke is managing his responsibilities excellently. Anyone who suggests otherwise hasn't spent time observing his work. Lady Hartwell had the grace to look embarrassed. Of course, I meant no offense. None taken. Now, if you'll excuse me. Elena returned to Lucian's side just as Dr. Winters approached. Your Grace, Dr. Winters said to Lucian, might I speak with you privately for a moment? Lucian tensed slightly. Elena squeezed his hand once, reassurance, then stepped back. They moved to a quieter corner of the room. Elena watched from a distance, trying to read their body language. Dr. Winters was speaking quietly, earnestly. Lucian listening, his expression carefully neutral. After a few minutes, they returned. Dr. Winters nodded to Elena and moved off to speak with the Thorntons. What was that about? Elena asked quietly. She wanted to apologize, Lucian said, for agreeing to come with my mother in the first place. She said she should have researched the situation before getting involved, and she wanted to let me know that she's spoken to several colleagues about neurological conditions, spreading accurate information instead of letting rumors persist. Elena felt warmth bloom in her chest. That's generous of her. It's more than generous. Lucian's voice caught slightly. It's the first time someone in the medical profession has treated my condition as something to be understood rather than feared. She's trying to change the narrative. For me and for others like me. She's a good person. She is. Lucian looked around the room. They all are. I spent 6 years assuming everyone would judge me, would fear me. But most of these people just want to talk about business and weather and local gossip. They don't care about my condition as long as I'm competent. Because you are competent, Elena said, and now they can see it. The gathering continued smoothly. Conversation flowed. Laughter echoed through the drawing room. At one point, Lord Hartwell pulled Lucian aside to discuss a potential partnership on a canal investment. Another guest asked about his library, and Lucian spent 20 minutes enthusiastically discussing rare texts and acquisition strategies. Elena watched him transform. The careful defensive man who'd greeted guests earlier disappeared, replaced by someone engaged, animated, genuinely enjoying himself. This was who he could be without fear, without constantly bracing for rejection. As the sun began to set, guests started making their departures. Polite thanks, promises to return invitations, genuine warmth in their farewells. When the last carriage rolled down the drive, Lucian sank into a chair by the window. "I did it," he said, sounding stunned. "I actually did it." Elena sat beside him. "You did more than that. You thrived. Did you see how interested Lord Hartwell was in your investment proposals? How Dr. Winters was advocating for you with the other guests?" "I was terrified the entire time." "Being brave doesn't mean not being afraid. It means doing it anyway." Elena took his hand. "I'm so proud of you." Lucian looked at her, and Elena saw tears gathering in his eyes. "I forgot what this felt like. Being around people without fear, having conversations that weren't about my condition or my competence, just existing as a person. You can have more of this, as much as you want." "Can I?" Lucian's voice was uncertain. "Or was today a fluke? Something that worked once but won't work again? Today was a beginning, not a fluke." Elena squeezed his hand. "And we're going to keep building on it. Slowly, carefully, at your pace. But we're not going back to isolation. You deserve better than that." Lucian pulled her close, burying his face in her shoulder. "Thank you. For believing in me when I couldn't. For pushing me when I wanted to hide. For everything." Elena held him tight. "You're welcome. But you did the hard part. You showed up. You engaged. You proved everyone wrong." They sat like that as darkness fell outside, holding each other in the quiet drawing room. Finally, Lucian said, "I want to write to my mother." Elena pulled back to look at him. "Are you sure?" "No, but I think I need to." Lucian's expression was complicated. Her apology didn't erase what she did, but it was honest. And after today, after seeing that people can accept me, condition and all, I think I'm ready to at least acknowledge that she tried to make amends. "What will you say?" "I don't know yet. Something honest. Maybe that I accept her apology, but I'm not ready for her to be part of my life again. Maybe that I need time. Maybe—" He paused. "Maybe that I hope someday we can rebuild something, but right now I'm focused on the life I've built without her." "That sounds fair," Elena said. "Does it? It feels harsh. It's honest. And honesty is what she asked for." Elena stood, holding out her hand. "Come on, let's write it together." They went to the library, their space, the room where so much of their partnership had been forged. Lucian sat at the desk, Elena beside him, and together they crafted a letter that was neither acceptance nor rejection, but something in between. Acknowledgement, truth, possibility, but not promise. When it was done, Lucian sealed it and set it aside to be posted in the morning. "There," he said. "One more thing resolved." "One more step forward," Elena corrected. Lucian turned to look at her. In the lamplight, his face was softer than she'd ever seen it. The careful defenses he'd maintained for so long had finally started to crumble, leaving someone vulnerable but no longer afraid of that vulnerability. "I love you," he said. "I know I've said it before, but I need you to know I mean it more now than I did then. You didn't just save my estate or my reputation. You saved me. From isolation, from fear, from the belief that I had to hide who I was to be acceptable." Elena felt her throat tighten. "You saved yourself. I just pointed out that you could." "No. You did more than that. You fought when I wanted to give up. You believed when I couldn't. You built something with me that I didn't know was possible." Lucian stood, taking both her hands in his. "I'm not the man I was when we married, and that's because of you." "We changed each other," Elena said. "I'm not the desperate girl who walked down that aisle either. I'm someone who fought for what I wanted, who learned that partnership is stronger than survival, who found something I didn't know I was looking for." "What's that?" "A home. Not a house or an estate, but a place where I belong, with someone who sees me as I am and values that." Elena's voice was steady. "You gave me that. We gave each other that." Lucian pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "What do we do now?" "Now? We live. We keep building this life we've created. We have more gatherings. We make more investments. We figure out what we want instead of just surviving what we don't." Elena smiled. "We do everything we couldn't do before because we were too busy fighting to exist." "That sounds terrifying." "It does, doesn't it?" Elena's smile widened. "But we'll figure it out together." "Together." Lucian echoed. Then he kissed her, deep, certain, without any of the hesitation that had marked their earlier interactions. When they finally broke apart, Elena said, "We should probably get some sleep. Tomorrow we have to write thank you notes to all the guests." Always practical. Someone has to be. Lucian laughed, and the sound filled the library like light. 6 months later, Elena stood in that same library, looking at the changes they'd made. New books lined the shelves, texts on medicine, neurology, epilepsy management. A donation from Dr. Winters, who'd become not just a medical advisor, but a genuine friend. Comfortable chairs had replaced the old, stiff furniture. The room felt lived in now, warm, like it belonged to real people, instead of someone performing the role of Duke. Through the window, Elena could see preparations underway for another gathering. This one larger, more ambitious. A summer celebration for local families, business partners, anyone who wanted to attend. Lucian's idea, though he'd needed weeks of convincing before he agreed to host it. He'd had 2 seizures in the 6 months since Edmund's defeat. One after receiving news that a major investment had fallen through. One after a particularly difficult negotiation with a business partner. Both had been managed, documented, and ultimately unremarkable. Life had continued. That was the revelation neither of them had quite believed at first, that a seizure wasn't the end of the world, wasn't proof of incompetence, was just something that happened and then was over. Lucian had started traveling again, small trips at first, to London for business, to neighboring estates for meetings, always with Elena, always with careful planning, but traveling nonetheless, reclaiming the world he'd given up 6 years ago. And people had adjusted. Some still whispered, but most just accepted that the Duke had a condition and continued doing business with him anyway. Because at the end of the day, competence mattered more than gossip. Footsteps behind her. Lucian appeared carrying a stack of correspondence. "More RSVPs for the celebration," he said, setting them on the desk. "We're up to 60 confirmations. That's a lot of people." "It is." Lucian moved to stand beside her at the window. "Are you sure we can handle it?" "We've handled worse," Elena leaned against him. "And Mrs. Dawson has everything organized within an inch of its life. We'll be fine." "I had a letter from my mother today." Elena turned to look at him. "How is she?" "Still in France. Still apologetic." Lucian's expression was complicated. "She asked if she could visit. Not now, but maybe in the autumn, just for a few days." "What did you say?" "That I'd think about it." Lucian met her eyes. "I'm not ready to forgive her completely, but I'm also not ready to cut her off forever." "Is that weak?" "It's human, and it's your choice." Elena took his hand. "Whatever you decide, I'll support it." "Even if I say yes?" "Even then, though I reserve the right to be coldly polite if she tries anything manipulative." Lucian laughed. "I'd expect nothing less." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the grounds slowly fill with preparations. Tables being set up, decorations being hung, the estate coming alive in ways it hadn't for years. "Do you ever regret it?" Lucian asked suddenly. "Marrying me? This life?" Elena considered the question seriously. Did she regret the desperate marriage arranged to clear her father's debts? Did she regret the isolation, the battles, the fear? "No," she said finally. "Not even a little. This life, our life, is better than anything I could have had otherwise. Yes, it's been hard, but it's been real. And it's been ours." "Ours," Lucian repeated softly. "I like that." "So do I." A commotion near the front of the house drew their attention. A carriage rolling up the drive, unexpected, unannounced. Elena felt Lucian tense beside her, old instincts dying hard. Then the carriage door opened and Marcus Webb stepped out, grinning. "I should have sent word I was coming," he called up to the window. "But I had news I thought you'd want to hear in person." They met him in the entrance hall. Webb was windblown from travel, his clothes dusty, but his expression was triumphant. "Edmund is leaving the country," he said without preamble. "Apparently his creditors finally caught up with him. He's fleeing to the continent to avoid debtor's prison. He won't be bothering you again." Elena felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she hadn't realized she was still carrying. "Are you sure?" "Completely. He's already gone. Left last week. Webb's grin widened. Thought you should know. You're finally, truly free of him. Lucian sat down heavily on the nearest chair. He's really gone. Really, actually gone. Can't petition from France. Can't threaten from France. Can barely survive in France if the rumors about his debts are accurate. Webb clapped Lucian on the shoulder. You won. Completely. Permanently. Elena watched Lucian process this, saw the moment it truly sank in, that the threat that had hung over them for so long was finally, definitively, gone. Stay for the celebration, Lucian said suddenly. We're hosting in 3 days. Stay. Celebrate with us. Webb looked surprised. I wouldn't want to impose, You're not imposing. You helped us win. You're part of this. Lucian stood, held out his hand. Please, stay. Webb shook his hand, smiling. All right, I'll stay. The celebration 3 days later was everything they'd hoped for, and more. 60 guests became 70 as word spread. The weather cooperated. Warm sun, light breeze, perfect for an outdoor gathering. Tables groaned under the weight of food. Music drifted across the lawn. Children ran through the gardens while adults talked and laughed and enjoyed themselves. Elena moved through the crowd, greeting guests, making introductions, ensuring everything ran smoothly. She caught glimpses of Lucian throughout the afternoon, talking investments with Lord Hartwell, discussing medical research with Dr. Winters, even playing lawn games with some of the younger guests. He looked happy. Not just content or managing, but genuinely happy. At one point, Lady Hartwell cornered her again. Duchess, I must say, this is extraordinary. The Duke has truly come into his own. He was always in his own, Elena said. He just needed space to show it. Well, whatever you've done, it's remarkable. My husband was just saying the Duke is one of the sharpest minds he's worked with. That railway investment has tripled in value. Elena smiled. The Duke is very good at what he does. Clearly, and you've been quite the influence from what I hear. The staff speaks highly of you. The tenants are thriving. The estate is better than it's been in decades. We work well together, Elena said simply. You do indeed. Lady Hartwell glanced at Lucian, then back to Elena. I owe you both an apology. When you first married, I confess I believed the rumors. I thought you'd made a terrible mistake. I'm glad to have been proven wrong. Most people believe the rumors, Elena said, but the truth tends to reveal itself eventually. It does, doesn't it? Lady Hartwell smiled. Thank you for this, for showing us that the Duke we'd all written off is actually worth knowing. She moved off, leaving Elena alone near the refreshment table. Marcus Webb appeared at her elbow. Quite the transformation. For who? Them or us? Both, I think. Webb took a glass of wine from the table. 6 months ago, you were fighting for your lives. Now you're hosting the social event of the season. That's not nothing. It still feels surreal sometimes, Elena admitted. Like I'm going to wake up and it'll all be gone. It's not going anywhere. You built something solid. Webb's expression turned serious. I've handled dozens of competency cases. Most of them don't end well. But this one worked because you both refused to give up. You fought when fighting seemed impossible. You trusted each other when trust felt dangerous. That's rare. Elena felt her throat tighten. Thank you for everything you did. I just filed paperwork and made arguments. You two did the real work. Webb raised his glass. To refusing to be defeated. To refusing to be defeated, Elena echoed. As sunset approached, the crowd began to thin. Guests made their farewells, promising to return invitations, expressing genuine warmth and acceptance. When the last carriage departed, Elena found Lucian sitting on a bench near the garden, watching the sky turn pink and gold. She sat beside him. Tired, exhausted, but in a good way. Lucian turned to look at her. I did something today I never thought I'd do again. What's that? I forgot to be afraid. For hours at a time, I just existed, talked to people, enjoyed myself, didn't think about seizures or judgment or all the things that could go wrong. His voice was wonder-filled. I forgot to be afraid. Elena took his hand. That's what freedom looks like. Is it? Because it feels fragile, like if I breathe wrong, it'll shatter. Nothing we've built is fragile. We've tested it against Edmund, against your mother, against the court system. It's held. It'll keep holding. Lucian squeezed her hand. I want to believe that. Then believe it. We've earned that much. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon. Stars began emerging in the darkening sky, the same stars Lucian had once mapped as a boy, before seizures and fear had taken that dream away. I'm thinking about getting another telescope, he said quietly. Elena looked at him in surprise. Really? Why not? My mother isn't here to take it away. I have someone who'd sit outside with me on clear nights. He paused, searching for words. I have permission to want things again, to pursue interests that aren't about managing my condition or protecting myself. Then get the telescope, Elena said. Get 10 telescopes if you want. Fill the house with them. Lucian laughed. One will suffice, but Elena, thank you for giving me back the ability to want, to hope, to imagine a future that isn't just about survival. You gave yourself that back. I just pointed out it was possible. We gave each other that back, Lucian corrected, echoing her words from months ago. That's what partners do, right? They see possibilities in each other that they can't see in themselves. Right, Elena agreed softly. They sat together as night fell completely, watching stars emerge one by one across the vast darkness. Below them, the manor glowed with lamplight, their home, their refuge, their hard-won sanctuary. A year ago, Elena had walked down an aisle expecting danger and isolation, had braced herself for a life of mere survival beside a man everyone called mad. Instead, she'd found partnership, challenge, someone who matched her intelligence and valued her strength, someone who taught her that love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect circumstances. It was about showing up day after day, fighting battles side by side, building something solid in the space between crisis and calm. Lucian shifted beside her. What are you thinking about?
How lucky we are, Elena said. How unlikely this all was. You needing a wife, me needing an escape, both of us finding exactly what we didn't know we were looking for. Luck had nothing to do with it, Lucian said. You fought for this. Every step of the way, you fought. Against Edmund, against society's expectations, against my own self-defeat. You made this happen. We made it happen, Elena corrected. Together.
Lucian stood, pulling her up with him. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close against the cooling night air. I love you, he said into her hair. More than I have words for. More than I knew was possible. I love you too, Elena whispered back. Always. They stood like that for a long moment, two people who'd been unwanted, discarded, written off, who'd found each other in desperation and built something extraordinary from the ruins of everyone else's expectations. Then Lucian said, Come on, let's go inside. I want to show you the library. I've been rearranging it again. Elena laughed. You're always rearranging that library. That's because I keep finding better systems, and also because you keep adding books. Someone has to keep your collection current. True, though I maintain that medical texts don't belong next to philosophy. They absolutely do. The philosophy of medicine is a whole field. They bickered companionably as they walked back to the manor, their voices fading into the warm night. Behind them, the gardens lay quiet and still, ready for tomorrow's work and tomorrow's battles and tomorrow's joys. But tonight was for celebration, for acknowledging how far they'd come, for standing in the house they'd defended and the life they'd built and knowing finally that it was theirs. No whispers were strong enough to take it away. No threats could destroy what they'd forged together. No judgment could diminish the truth they'd proven, that love, real love, wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing each other, again and again, through crisis and calm, through fear and hope, through every impossible moment that everyone said would break them. They'd chosen each other, and they'd won. Inside the manor, lamplight glowed warm and welcoming. Mrs. Dawson had left tea in the library, knowing they'd want it. The repaired window reflected their images back at them, not ghosts or shadows, but solid, real, alive. Home, Lucian said softly. Home, Elena agreed. And for the first time in either of their lives, the word meant exactly what it should, a place of safety, partnership, and unconditional acceptance. A place they'd built together from nothing but stubbornness, strategy, and the belief that they deserved better than the lives they'd been handed. They'd been right, and as they settled into their chairs by the fire, books and tea and each other's company filling the comfortable silence, Elena felt something she'd never quite believed in before. Peace. Not perfect. Not without challenges still ahead, but real, earned, and entirely theirs. Together, they'd rewritten every story anyone had tried to tell about them, and the ending they'd created was far better than any beginning they'd been given. It was exactly what they'd fought for, and it was more than enough.